A stranger lay on the ground. Coughing, he said that was all they could do. The sword lying nearby suggested he was a swordsman. He no longer had the strength to fight. Another young man stood opposite. The other man looked like a demon. The young man looked at his opponents, grinned, said he seemed to have won, then smiled awkwardly and wiggled his wings. Yuki is the main character who now looks like a demon, though he was once a man named Sagawa Yuki, and after his reincarnation he assumed this form. After rebirth, the young man gained a strong ability to cheat. Instead of being reborn human, he returned as a demon, the horn on his forehead and the wings on his back, proving he is not human. Yuki couldn't help staring at the defeated opponents. The people on the floor had been members of the hero team, but now they lay beaten. Halfway to the demon lord's castle and climbing, they faced high-level demons and a chamber with a master, and he thought Yuki did not know how to handle the situation. Peace will not return to the world until the hero defeats the demon lord. If the hero falls to a mere demon, the world will descend into panic and chaos. Smiling, the main character thought it would be disastrous if the world fell into chaos. But now we must heal the heroes and dump their bodies in the nearest village. Yuki studied the bodies of the defeated and thought about how to tell the high-level demons that the people had just fled. Seeing the blonde young man, he believes this is the human hero Yuga, and remembers the hero shouting about the holy sword Excalibur while waving that sword right in front of him. Yuki grinned and fired explosive magic back. Initially, the main character plans to transfer this man and now must decide who to cure first. Looking at the girl, he thinks the next member of the hero's team is a young magician named Mikena. Throughout the fight, she cast seductive glances at the hero even before it began. Annoyed, the young man couldn't hold back and almost immediately blew up the mage girl. Raven, the team's third member, was a serious swordsman who was cold and quiet, but came across as overly proud. Annoyed by the swordsman's appearance, the protagonist used high-level dark magic at the start of the battle to make him disappear. But the hero had only made him invisible. Hidden from those around him, the young man used magic to blow up the hero and the magician while they were in turmoil. At that moment, the hero felt nothing. Only one hero remains. This is Cecilia, a young priest. After defeating the rest of the hero's team, he considered how to deal with her. The protagonist hurried behind the priest's back and shut off her awareness. Yuki looked at Cecilia and decided that since she wasn't injured, he didn't need to use healing magic on her. The young man looked at the girl closely and was surprised by how helpless she seemed in that state. To the main character, this girl was perfect beauty. Deciding whether to keep the girl prisoner, he knows acting recklessly would anger the Lord. Yet he is confident he could defeat the demon lord if forced to fight. Even so, keeping prisoners is ethically unacceptable. The protagonist orders his servants to carry this last person, and they agree. The young man says goodbye to his angel. 3 days later, the hero joins an arrogant swordsman, a cunning magician, and a priest to break into the demon lord's domain. The main character laughed, pleased that the hero and a stubborn group of fools had returned for more. Introduced himself as Yuki, leader of the Dark Knights, and said he would personally send them all to hell. Yuki realized he would have to announce his low rank to the whole hero group, so he used a confident tone. A hero said Yuki's name belonged to this demon. That hero added that Yuki was preparing for the fight. Dodging a powerful blow, the main character glanced at the priest, Cecilia, as he flew past. The young man dodged the mage girl's magic attack and the swordsman's strikes, then froze and stared at Cecilia. Cecilia didn't understand why the demon was looking at her. Suddenly, a hero interrupted and ordered the young man to fight with all his might. And Yuki felt embarrassed, apologized to the young man, and wondered why he had been staring at the girl. He admits to being a bit rude toward opponents who fight seriously. The young man unleashes top-level dark magic using a skill called Endless Darkness. Dread filled the hero as they stared at the demon. Yuki incapacitated all the members of the hero's team. They lay on the ground with no sign of life. The young man stepped closer, relieved there were no visible wounds, and admired how she had immediately used barrier magic to protect herself. He magnanimously treated the hero's team again, dumped their bodies in a nearby village, and a month later, repelled their attack again. Over time, the demon lord and the high-level demons came to see the hero's team as very weak. He dislikes saying that, but he's different from everyone else. If he hadn't been here, the heroes would certainly have defeated the demon lord. The young man lies on the bed, thinking he will soon let the team move on. That girl isn't just beautiful, and he is sure she has a great character. So next time he will follow through on his plan. After a while, the heroes team showed up, and the girl magician told Yuga they had to beat that boring demon today so they could finally move on. The main character watched the arriving heroes team without expression, decided the hero's name was Yuga, and felt there was no need to call him boring. He looked at the cool swordsman and saw he was still taciturn, mentally studying the young man and noting he stayed silent though he could have spoken. Priest Cecilia shouted for them to fight as hard as they could. The young man still thought his angel was cute. Closing his eyes, he thinks about what he needs to do to get down to business. Yuki laughed and turned to the stubborn, stupid people who had come back for more. As head of the Dark Knights, he was ready to send them all to hell. The hero and the swordsman rushed into battle. The young man shouted that he was ready to fight. Confident in his cheating, he believed they had no chance of beating him. Little by little, they began to realize how insignificant they were. He thinks that's enough for today. The young man turned to the hero and said the hero still had not realized he would never be able to defeat him. The hero said it didn't matter. He had to fight for those suffering now. Then Yuki pointed at Cecilia and told the hero to leave the girl here. If they comply, he will let everyone else go ahead. The hero, the swordsman, and Cecilia stared in shock while the mage girl giggled. Yuki shouted that he would never agree to this because Cecilia was his valued companion. Then he asked whether he was really willing to miss such an opportunity. The deal is cancelled. They will restart their journey from the nearest village. The young mage urged Yuga to accept the deal. The young man called her Makana and asked what she meant. The protagonist watched it all. She turned to Yuga and asked him to think about it. Yuga may seem dull, but he has powerful magic and put saving the world first. He believes he asked her to stop calling him boring. Hero Yuge grew angry and said even the thought of leaving Cecilia was unbearable. The magician girl said Cecilia could not do it right away, and that it would be fine as long as they defeated the demon lord and returned for her before anything happened. The young man said they understood everything, so they were leaving now, and Cecilia was staying here. Grind, the main character, told them to get through. Yuga turned to Cecilia and promised they would come back for her without fail. When the door closed, the young man thought they were finally alone and realized he was getting nervous. Cecilia stood ready and said she knew her strength wouldn't even scratch the demon, but she would fight the young man until her last breath. The girl activated the holy laser skill. At that moment, the main character held up his hands and politely asked her to wait a moment. Cecilia asked what had happened and whether the young man might be waiting for her to lower her guard, and the main character said no, that it was all wrong and that he was telling the truth. The girl asked what was happening and whether the young man planned to mock her before killing her. The young man said that if he had wanted to kill, he would have done it at the start. At the same time, his heart began to race. The young man only wants to confess to the girl, saying he fell in love with her at first sight and asking her to start a relationship with him. Embarrassed, the main character looked at the girl and she was surprised by his confession. The girl suddenly bows and apologizes to the young man, leaving him shocked. Curled into a corner, he hugged his knees. The main character says he was rejected and it's over. He wants to die. The panicked girl asked if the young man was really okay. Cecilia stopped and stepped back from the young man, calling him an enemy. She started using her magic and asked why he wasn't resisting her attacks. The main character told her she had rejected him, and now he wants to die. The girl shouted shyly that the young man should not tease her like that. Yuki replied that the girl is very sweet even when she's angry, but it doesn't matter anymore. The young man said that if he kept living, he would be stuck in this room forever, and although all he would have to do is attack people, she really does not want to attack anyone. The girl replies she has never seen demons like the young man, and that demons are usually violent and savage. The main character said he had been reborn in a past life. He had been human and was telling the truth. His name was Sagawa Yuki, and he died in an accident. She was surprised to hear he had been reborn. Cecilia asked whether he could have been human before, and why he would not join the other people. Grand, the main character, thought that if he had said he was an ally of the people, the girl would have believed him. The girl said defeating the demon lord would solve his problem, but the young man replied he would never do it because defeating him would likely make him the next demon lord. This will keep him stuck in this room, and he's had enough of this lifestyle. He seized the chance and confessed to the girl. It was his plan to end his life as a demon. He was confident her team was strong enough to defeat the demon lord. Smiling, he says everything would be perfect. The girl steps forward and says it's not like that. Cecilia says the young man is very strong and should use his strength to help people. Given such incredible strength, a young man could transform into a human and easily fit into society. She reaches out to him and asks if he will go with her to the outside world. That day, the demon lord was defeated, and peace settled over the world. After some time in the capital called Minerva, everyone rejoiced when the brave hero returned. News that the hero had defeated the demon lord spread like wildfire, and the whole world rejoiced. And Minerva, the capital of the kingdom of Clarence, even held a large parade to honor the hero. During the momentous event, he arrived at the Adventure Guild. The young man looked at the building and knew this was the place. Cecilia convinced the main character in the demon lord's castle, and he escaped. After she gave him a map, he headed to Minerva City, while the members of the hero team were told he had disappeared and was playing in a box. A young man enters the Adventurers Guild, apologizes, and asks to register as a member. Surprised, a man said he didn't expect anyone to show up today because there's a parade honoring the heroes team. Clayman yawned listlessly as he looked at the young man. Surprised, the young man said he wanted to register with the guild. Yuki felt the man had dead fish eyes and wondered if he was all right. The man wondered if he should register as a guild member, saying the staff were out. He did not know what to do, and he thought all the staff were kids who took time off to watch the hero. At last, he found everything he needed, handed the young man a piece of paper, and asked him to write his details there. Generally, all that was required was his name, his age, and a signature accepting responsibility for his own death. After a while, the young man hands over the claim form. Taking it, the man reads the name as Yuki and the age as 21. He then gives the young man his gift card. He warns him not to lose her, because replacing her will cost the young man money, and if he does lose her, it must be within 3 days, since the process is very annoying and he will have to deal with it. Yuki said he understood, but he figured the rest of the staff would not be back for at least 3 days. And thinking of Clayman, he realizes the man really hates his job and must have a limit to his laziness. The man says everything is over and tells the young man to give his best after 3 days. Otherwise, the man will have to handle all the requests. That day, the young man ignored the man's complaints and did his best to fulfill his many requests while processing the completed tasks, grumbling the whole time because it was a pain in the ass, but no longer the hero's problem. That night, he lay on his bed and resolved to advance his rank and save money, and once he had enough to support himself, he would confess to Cecilia again. Knowing she would accept his love next time, the main character was so happy he couldn't sleep all night. A week after joining the guild, he had completed enough requests to reach D rank. He asks the young man if he doesn't see the beautiful ladies here, points out that everyone else submits their completed requests there, and wonders why the young man comes to him. Smiling, Yuki says at first he thought the beautiful women were the secretaries, but after a while he got used to the man being the guild's secretary. The man shouted that he had caused even more work. Yuki thinks that even after the other employees returned, he kept passing completed requests for others to claim. Someone probably complained about him, but he is doing a good job. Yuki said it was a man's job, so it was fine, and he should not complain. The man said he was never a secretary. The day of the hero parade had already passed. The main character ignored his muttering and began interrupting. Suddenly, they heard a commotion, and Yuki asked what had happened. Turning around suddenly, the main character saw a familiar silhouette apologizing to the crowd and asking permission to leave. Cecilia suddenly appeared, leaving Yuki confused, and everyone in the neighborhood was surprised and unsure why Miss Cecilia from the heroes team was here. Later, Yuki and Cecilia sat in the carriage, and the girl apologized, saying she had wanted to find the young man sooner, but the parade and celebrations left no time. Reassuring the girl, the young man told her not to worry, saying he could finally enjoy life fully and had always wanted to go to another world, and she said she was glad he was not bored. While distracted, Yuki said the girl had still found him and praised her. The girl replied that at first she had been worried about what to do because the young man had probably changed his appearance. It was easy to find him, and the girl gave him a scornful look that Yuki didn't understand, so she asked what was wrong. Cecilia sighs and asks what is really wrong. According to her, the young man had not changed his name or his appearance at all. The young man asked how he had not changed his name, then asked the girl to take a closer look. To get past the pain, he broke off his horn and tore off his wings. He's afraid they'll grow back, but not so fast. The girl said even so, the hero's team still remembers his face. After a while, the coachman told Mrs. Cecilia they had arrived home. The young man stepped out of the carriage and saw a large house. Spears suddenly appeared at his throat, and a guard demanded to know who he was, ordering him to step away from Lady Cecilia immediately. The young man ignored the guards and remembered guild whispers about a strange man seen with Lady Cecilia. The coachman also eyed him with suspicion during the trip. Without warning, the girl stepped directly in front of the young man and ordered the guards to put away their spears, because he is her friend. Yuki glanced at the guards and realized they did not like seeing Cecilia with him. After a while, the young man and the girl sat at the table. Cecilia turned to Yuki and asked whether he could leave the guild. Yuki was stunned and asked what the girl meant because he did not understand why she was saying that. Cecilia apologized for the unexpected request, and Yuki thought he had only just joined the guild. The girl asks the young man to let her explain. She agrees the hero's team defeated the demon lord, but the demon threat is not over. Pressing a hand to his face, the young man admits the girl is right. Even if the demon lord was gone, his troops were still there. They are less effective without orders, but they can still cause damage. Demons won't be a problem now. With their leader dead, disagreements among the former allies will soon flare up again. And Cecilia says, according to rumors, the Gala Empire, known for its military might, has already begun preparing. Every country, including the Kingdom of Clarence, wanted the best. Young women and daughters of fallen soldiers from many countries overwhelmed the hero with marriage proposals. And Yuki thought that was to be expected of a hero. Cecilia says it's not just about the hero, but about the whole team. Yuki abruptly approaches the girl and is asked whether she is being rude. The girl says she refuses, of course, but still hesitates. Yuki asks why the girl suddenly stopped talking. Cecilia explains that if you become famous at such a time, the young man will also get similar offers. That's why the girl wants to hire the young man and pay him for his work. Yuki agrees, so few people will know his name. He then asks the girl if she has enough money to pay for the young man's services. She says Yuki is unquestionably stronger than any S-rank adventurer, and honestly, even her entire fortune wouldn't be enough to hire him. But she believes the young man has romantic feelings for her. Seeing her confused face, Yuki takes off and says this is the place to start. The main character says he wants love between them, not money. Laughing, he says he has a cheat ability. Even if spies or assassins were sent after him, they would be in trouble. Laughing, he says he won't give in to other women's temptations, because only Cecilia shines in his eyes. At one point, the young man realizes he has returned to reality and is telling the girl everything directly. Cecilia began to shake, then laughed out loud. Cecilia asks for forgiveness and says she just could not resist. The main character stares at her in disbelief and waits for an explanation. The other woman first says she can't, then sighs and admits it's definitely over now. The girl said she did not expect that answer, and crocodiles even flew out of her eyes. The young man said he shouted something strange in a burst of emotion. The girl says she is growing more convinced that Yuki was human in a past life, since there is no demon like that in this world. The main character asks her if she really didn't believe him until now. Cecilia said she had just checked again. Yuki smiled awkwardly, wondering why Cecilia spoke like that. After a while, she said she had other things to do and needed to leave. Smiling, the girl said it was fun today and suggested the young man meet again. Yuki replied that he had fun and added that he had one more request. Embarrassed, he asked if he could call her Cecilia, and she smiled, agreed, and said she would call him Yuki. The young man was delighted. She said goodbye to the girl and went to her house. After agreeing to meet Cecilia later, he went home excited and thought they had grown a bit closer. Later, the young man was glad the hike had been wonderful, that he got to see Cecilia, and that it looked like he would have a fun weekend. When the young man reached the mansion, they refused him entry, and the guard said the hero had come to see the lady, so he should leave quietly. Yuki realized that despite agreeing, there was nothing they could do. Exhaling, he decides to walk around the city and soon sees a crowd on the city streets, wondering what caused it. They then spot a striking swordsman who draws a lot of attention. Yuki says he recognizes him from somewhere. They tell Yuki it's because this is Raven, a swordsman and the hero's partner. The main character watches the swordsman and thinks he seems unsure how to handle the crowd. Seeing the hero in trouble, the young man decides to help and calls to the crowd that the hero is that way. Everyone rushed off where the young man pointed, thinking it would be easy. Raven stood alone and didn't know what to do. Then Yuki grabbed his hand and said they had to run immediately. They slip into an alley after a bit, and Yuki says they kind of ran away as he keeps glancing at the street to react if anyone comes their way. The young man wonders whether the swordsman will really stay silent in this situation. He feels he did nothing to deserve thanks. Yuki tells Raven to change his clothes so Raven can move quietly. As the young man prepares to leave, he asks Yuki to wait. Yuki was surprised the swordsman spoke. He thinks the young man surprised him. The main character couldn't believe that such a cold-blooded, handsome man had an anime voice. The main character asks whether the young man stayed quiet because of his voice, noting that everyone has things they avoid mentioning and that he does too, while Raven wonders if the young man will mock his voice. Yuki says it's not the boy's fault he has that voice. Raven says the young man is completely different and doesn't laugh at his voice. Yuki realizes the swordsman was hurt by this, so he stays silent. The young man says he's not laughing because he's met men with that voice before, and Raven smiles. Worried others will see him as disrespectful to the hero's team, Yuki decides to leave. He tells the swordsman he's leaving, but the young man asks him not to. Raven asks Yuki to be his friend, and Yuki is surprised by the suggestion. The swordsman says it's fine if the young man doesn't want to. Only his mom didn't laugh at his voice, so he thought Yuki might become someone close to him. The main character says he doesn't mind becoming friends at all, then gives me his name and says it's nice to meet you. And the swordsman rejoices, names himself Raven, and reciprocates. Yuki says it's been 20 years since he reincarnated here, so this is his first time making friends, and Raven says the young man reminds him of someone, but Yuki says he just imagined it. After a while, the young man arrives at the Adventurers Guild and orders breakfast. He thinks his breakfast is modest, but now it seems that if he skips it, he will receive an assignment. And a woman suddenly approaches and says the young man eats in an interesting way. Surprised, the main character thinks he did not notice how a beautiful woman arrived while the young man was eating bread. She repeats her daughter's remark that the young man is very interesting. Yuki is surprised. The woman smiles and introduces herself as Celia Aquarine, Cecilia's mother, and says she is pleased to meet Yuki. Surprised, the young man says he is very pleased to meet you. Then he suddenly picks up the whole salad in his hands and swallows everything on the plate at once. Awkwardly, the young man asked the woman what she wanted from him. Celia giggled and told him he should not have eaten so quickly. She compliments him, saying he is very interesting. The woman says she heard their guards were rude to the young man the other day, so she came to apologize. Surprised, Yuki says he really thought they treated him poorly, but because he had a meeting later, he didn't take it personally. He thinks Celia is not a bad person. Rudely, the woman asked about the meeting the young man had mentioned because she had heard he loved Cecilia. Celia asks about the young man's relationship with her daughter, and panicked, he denies it, saying he was dating a male friend. Smiling, the woman says she misunderstood, and saying it would be terrible if her daughter got involved with a bad man, she apologizes for suspecting the young man, while Yuki is shaking all over and then says everything is fine. Celia says everything's fine and invites the young man to come with her. And when Yuki asks where he's being called, Celia says it's obvious and summons him to her mansion. The woman asks if the young man wants to see her daughter Cecilia. Yuki is very happy, agrees, and says he really wants to meet her. After a while, they reach the mansion. The young man turns to Celia, asks about the guards at the gate, and says they are completely different. Saying the guards were rude to the guest, the woman insists this cannot be ignored. She asks the young man if he wants the details, but he refuses. Laughing, Celia tells him not to be so afraid. The guards were only being punished by their head maid. Their head maid was an A-rank adventurer, but after some events, she quit adventuring and became their housemaid. The young man thinks a rank is probably extremely strong. Celia says she scares people when angry but treats her husband well. They once had a big fight, and 6 months ago he fully recovered from a serious injury. As an A-rank adventurer, the injury was only a bruise. Finding a nurse for the mistress was a relief. They somehow seem like a happy married couple. Yuki figured he was a bit worried about her husband. The girl then says she is easy to talk to. A pretty maid came up to them and greeted her mistress. Noticing Yuki behind the mistress's back, she says, Yuki is a maid of the Aquarine family named Sophia, and the young man greets her, introduces himself, and thinks she does not look like a simple person at all. Celia asked if Sophia's husband was okay. Sophia said no. He kept losing consciousness and it would take time for him to get back to normal. Yuki decides to pray for the guards. Sophia turns to the woman and the young man and says she will show them around the mansion. Celia waves to Yuki and calls him over, and when he looks through the doorway, he sees Cecilia in a very light outfit, and she notices people staring and looks surprised. Celia stepped aside and Yuki kept watching the girl. She then yelled through the house about why Yuki was here. Celia laughed and said her daughter is definitely not a morning person. At that moment, the young man lay badly beaten and thought Celia had deliberately framed him. Cecilia's unexpected magic strike had been too strong. After a while, Cecilia dressed and saw Yuki kneeling, so she asked her daughter to forgive the young man because the daughter still looked good, and the young man agreed, saying it happened because of his mother. Yuki asked why the woman had brought him here. The woman said he had talked to Cecilia at their house the other day and that she had seen them. The panicked young man asked if the woman had really heard what he was saying. Celia imitates the young man, saying it was so cool when he said there was only Cecilia in his eyes, and he struck a funny pose. Yuki realized this woman had seen everything. He asked me to kill him. Celia grins and says they will now move on to important matters. Knowing that Cecilia gets many marriage proposals, the young man says she told him about arranged marriages. Celia says one of the offers came from a hero. Terrified, Yuki asks what that means. Celia smiles and says the hero seems to like Cecilia. Yuki asks how Cecilia answered the suggestion. Cecilia refused. The woman told the young man not to worry, but the hero refused to give up. Yuki shouted and asked what was wrong with him. The hero ordered him not to fall in love with her because the team already has a magician. He swears that nothing will interfere with his love. Celia smiled and said what the young man thought of the hero, that he apparently loves Cecilia very much, and she added that she wants to ask Yuki something. A woman asks if he will marry Cecilia. Suddenly, the girl blushes and asks her mother to stop. Cecilia interrupts and demands a yes or no. The young man thinks this might be his only chance. Yuki bows her head and apologizes, and he agrees the woman's offer is very tempting. He also confessed his love to Cecilia and was rejected, but once he becomes a decent person, he will confess to her again. When she suddenly brought up marriage, he was surprised. The woman said she had heard enough. She smiled and told the young man he had passed the test. She won't give her daughter to the first person she meets. Yuki screamed, accusing the woman of tricking him again. The woman replied that it would be just terrible if a bug got attached to her daughter and that she will be glad if her friend is a young man. A woman with kind eyes watches a young man. Yuki thinks Celia somehow liked him. Soon the young man reached the Urselski forest. On an errand today, he entered this terrible forest. Since joining the guild, the young man has risen to the C rank. Since he learned the character likes Cecilia, he's been working hard and wants to be a bit like him. The young man came here to subdue the curly-haired person who must be somewhere here. Yuki walks by and spots rustling in the nearby bushes, senses movement, leaps aside, lands on his feet, and attacks the stranger with magic. A headless figure appears before him. He stops and calls Yuki captain. Surprised, he turns to a girl named Duke and remembers that when he lived in the castle, she served under Dolahan. Persuaded by Cecilia, he left everything without a word. It turns out she is alive. The knight rushed to the captain and asked where his wings and horns were, then asked where they had been all this time. And after the young man disappeared and the demon lord was defeated, they grew worried and went to look for him, while the young man asked them to calm down. Duke said Hapanaz and Sheik were worried, and Yuki was surprised they were here too, so Duke pointed out they were supposed to meet a little further on, and Yuki asked the captain to come with her. Soon, a winged girl and a cute young man appear, turn to the captain, and tell him he is alive. One of them looked like a heavenly angel. Happy Niz was a harpy and Sheik was a pixie, and they were Yuki's subordinates. Collapsing into Yuki's arms, she felt him stroke her head and tell her they were still alive, while Duke asked Yuki not to think about the fact that they were dead. The pixie laughed and said that because the hero and his team defeated the Lord, the three of them escaped from the castle, and while they ran, Duke cried the whole time and kept calling for the captain, and Yuki realized they were always thinking about him. Duke said she couldn't help worrying about where he was. Deepening said they couldn't leave the young man alone, and Duke replied that sometimes he switches over and shouts strange words. Yuki realizes he does not like how the girls think of him. The girls in chic say it is good they found him, then ask where the captain's horns and wings are. He says he tore them out and threw them away. They rushed to the captain and asked what the young man had done. The pixie laughed then. Yuki watched and listened closely to what was said to him. Yuki said he confessed his love to the cute priest on the hero's team, was rejected, and is now human. The girls stared at him in horror. Duke turned to the young man and asked why he was chasing a girl. After all, a family is involved and it is very sad. The main character says he is now a man named Yuki and is no longer the girl's captain, so they can live as they choose. Duke denied this and said the captain is the captain. Heppins agreed with Duke and said she did not want it either. Yuki tried to deny it, but Duke cut him off and asked if this priest was really cute. Heppins replied she was beautiful and confirmed she was very beautiful and had a good body. Yuki felt the girls were not listening to him at all. A girl began whispering that the captain was now a man in love. The girls said they needed to meet her right away. They turned to the young man and, in a commanding tone, asked him to take them to her. Yuki said he was busy right now subduing the chickens and had no time to take care of them. The girls said they had accepted the order. Hepping said the task was finished and it was time to go, with a huge number of dead monsters behind her. Yuki said that if the girls said that, they had to be ready for anything. The girls agreed. Soon they looked like ordinary people, and even Duke had a human head. Duke tied her helmet to her armor to keep her head from falling off and said it was bothering her, and the young man thought she looked handsome without wings and that his small wings could be hidden under their clothes. The problem began with cheerful refusals. As a harpy, feathers grew from her arms and legs. Respecting her determination, the young man removed all her feathers. He thinks happiness wanted this, so he has no regrets. And after a while, the young man came to the Adventurers Guild and said he was done with the chickens, saying without being asked that the three of them were really Yuki's friends. After that, having turned into beautiful people, Yuki led the three of them to Cecilia's mansion. After some time at the mansion, Cecilia told Yuki that he was just terrible. Heppins complained to Cecilia about the feathers. She hugged the priest and said she was very kind. Cecilia told Yuki that even if disguising himself as a human is important, he must consider the girl's feelings and control his behavior, and Yuki admitted he had acted very poorly and now regretted it. Cecilia asked the young man if they were really just Yuki's former subordinates, since they seemed to respect him very much, and the Duke said the mansion is very large, and added that only the Demon Lord's mansion is much bigger. Yuki said that's true now. Duke hadn't been like that at first because Duracons are usually quiet. The girl said she hated the captain at first because he came from a well-known demon family in the Lord's castle. Cecilia was surprised. And Duke said the captain was known for being a hikikomori. One day, he told his boss, Zakir, that it would be better for him to leave the room before he lost his temper. She said she'd tried to persuade the captain many times, but grew tired and stopped contacting him, and Cecilia laughed. According to her, there were rumors about him, so she tried to fix them as a subordinate, but she was beaten up and became who she is now. Yuki thought she was his first subordinate back then and that he felt inspired. He may have changed her deeply. Cecilia asked how he met the other two friends. The main character started talking about meeting Pixie Chic and then asked where they had gone. He panicked and said they had actually left the room. They're in disguise now, but anything could happen. Yuki appeared in Sophia and told Capines she had a perfect angle and shouldn't forget it. Then she turned to Sophia and said she was with him. Sophia was surprised and asked if she really wasn't the new maid, because a new maid was due today and she had assumed it was her. Yuki pulled Capines, who had changed her clothes, away from Sophia, and Sophia replied that she was very sorry and that Capines would have made an excellent maid. Yuki decides she must find Chic now because his curiosity worries her, and she is most afraid for the little pixie. Then the young man notices a garden in the window. He realizes he worried for nothing. At that moment, she was lying on Celia's lap. The woman stroked Sheikh's head and said he was poor and lost. Then the woman turned to Yuki and asked if he had really brought the two girls here. Yuki protested loudly that they were just friends. Yuki asked whether he really wasn't bothering the woman. Celia reassured him that she loved children and that he wasn't bothering her at all. He had only been running around the garden and playing, and Celia had joined him. After they'd played enough, he fell asleep. After a while, the young man turns to the girls, asks if they are satisfied, and then says they are leaving. Turning around, he asks them not to tell anyone they are going with him. Duke replies confidently that they will. Happens agrees, and Sheik rejoices and says of course they will go with him. They begin living together. It did not end there. The next day, the young man came to Cecilia's house, where Hepenese met him. Sophia hired Hepenese as a maid at Aquarine's house. She saw the young man off and wished him a pleasant stay. Yuki realized the girl really likes it. Celia greeted the young man, pleased he had come, invited him to sit on that side, and asked whether he had seen the new maid. Celia asked the young man what his plans were for the day because she wanted Yuki to go on vacation with her. Lately, the engagement talks at team meetings have left her very tired, so she wants to give her a day off. The young man says Cecilia is very serious and cannot refuse without a good reason. Cecilia is a girl who wants to go shopping and wants the young man with her the whole time. Yuki blushes and realizes that it is an officially allowed date. Smiling, Yuki promises he will definitely keep her company. Celia replies that she expected the young man to say that. Outside, the carriage is already waiting. Celia says Cecilia is expecting a young man. Later, the young man comes out of the mansion and sees Cecilia looking very beautiful. Yuki apologizes to the girl and asks if she has been waiting long. The young man realizes he has always wanted to say that. Cecilia is wearing something different today. The outfit suits her very well. Cecilia said everything was fine and thought that if she called Yuki, he would come right away. Eventually, Yuki and Cecilia arrive in the city. The young man asks if he really needs to change his clothes. Cecilia replied that if she were found out, it could also harm the young man. Yuki replied that he would do his best to make everything go smoothly. Cecilia smiles and says she is really looking forward to it. The young man and the girl had a great day together. They went shopping, Cecilia picked out dresses and tried one on, and Yuki really liked it. Cecilia was happy because today was a lot of fun. She has been very tired lately, so she will get a good rest today. Yuki was delighted and said he was glad to hear it. An accessory shop appears, so Yuki asks Cecilia if they should go in, and she agrees, but a stranger suddenly notices them. The figure was a hero and a magician, and the young man was surprised to see it was Cecilia, who felt embarrassed and tried to hide her face with a hat. And when the hero began calling her name, she covered his mouth to stop him. She whispered to the young man that they were hiding right now and asked why he was calling Cecilia by name and whether he wanted her to be recognized. The young man says he understood everything and apologizes to Makana and Cecilia. Cecilia replies there is nothing to worry about. He thanks the girl for forgiving him. The hero asks what the girl is doing here, says they haven't had any days off lately, so they decided to take a walk now, beams and asks if she wants to join them. Yuki grows angry, feeling the hero doesn't notice him. Cecilia rejects him, saying she's already out with a friend. The hero asks again about her new friend. When the hero says he can go with them since they wanted to go to that store, the young man takes the girl's hand and invites her to come along. Makana and Yuki are left alone. Angry, she says their date with the hero is a complete disaster and looks at the young man with sad eyes, saying she had such a hard time inviting him for a walk so she could go shopping like in the old days. Yuki thinks back to the old days and assumes the hero and Makona have been friends since childhood. The young man looks like a gambler, though she wonders if he is a simpleton. Then the girl turns to him and asks whether he likes the priest. Noticing they were together, she assumed it was a date. She asks whether the young man could do a better job than Yuga, who might give up on the priest. She thinks she cannot rely on a young man with such a gloomy face. Changing the subject, she asks him to come with her because they cannot be left alone. The young man expected her to help, but she has a very bad temper. They step into the store. Cecilia calls Yuki and apologizes for leaving her behind. Not paying attention, Yuki says there are a lot of decorations here and offers the girl something she likes to buy. Yuga steps between them and says he'll buy jewelry too, offering Makana and Cecilia the chance to pick what they like. Assuming the young man was competing with him, Yuki agreed to buy jewelry only for Cecilia, guessed what would suit her, and found the right piece of jewelry. Cecilia then puts on a modest pendant with a lovely shining stone and says, "Yuki has good taste." Yuga barges in and tells Cecilia he picked her jewelry too, and his piece is very large and flashy. Yuki realized the young man was clearly not all right because he had picked such a large stone, and then Yuga took off Cecilia's hat and invited her to put jewelry on it, which frightened McCain and Yuki. Everyone around shouted that it must be Cecilia. A hero stood beside her, and if you looked closely, McCain was there too. The crowd started squeezing everything. McCain blamed Yuga for his clumsiness. The hero was called Cecilia, and the girl was called Yuki. After a while, all four left the store. Yuki suggested they finish up, and everyone agreed. The young man expected Yuga would regret it. The next day, Yuki arrived at Cecilia's place, but was met by an angry Celia, and he became very scared when he learned Cecilia was ill. He asked if the girl was okay. To calm the young man, Celia said she was sleeping in her room. She seemed exhausted from yesterday's excitement. Yuki sank into despair, blaming himself, while Celia told him not to be so upset, saying people think it is just a cold, so she'll be cured in a few days, and that she was not mad at him. She asked him to keep the girl company yesterday. However, the woman heard the hero wanted to take care of the sick Cecilia, so she sent him home. She also said yesterday was just a bad day, and Yuki was scared. And Celia added that Cecilia said the young man tried to cheer the girl up yesterday, and she asks to join the company again if there is another opportunity. If he wishes, he can visit Cecilia before leaving. After a while, he comes to her room and apologizes for yesterday since she lost her precious day off. Cecilia said Yuki wasn't to blame. The girl blamed Yuki, and the young man asked what it meant that it was all his fault. The girl blamed Yuki for the way her day off ended and told him to try harder next time. Yuki flushed and wondered what it meant that Cecilia had arranged another date for him. The young man abruptly stood and shouted for the girl to hand over everything. Yesterday's date failed, but the next one will be fine, so she should wait for him. Sophia kicked him out because she preferred her younger mistress, and the young man protested. A few days later, Cecilia made a full recovery. Once he had calmed down, the young man returned to the guild to work. Clayman was in a very good mood and asked Yuki to listen to news about his life. The man said his wife has been in a very good mood lately. Yuki couldn't understand why he kept listening to him all the time. Clayman says something must have happened at her job, and she treats him so kindly. Yuki imagined Cecilia as his wife, looking beautiful every morning when they met. Embarrassed, the young man slapped his cheeks. Clayman, surprised by the noise in the hall, interrupted his thoughts. Raven arrived at the guild. Yuki was surprised to see him. The young man walked up to the main character and pointed to the exit. Yuki fell silent because so many people were here, then reached out to claim it, said he wanted to complete the order with Raven, and asked if there was anything good. Claiming gave them a B-rank order to kill a stone dragon. Raven tugged the young man's shirt, and Yuki said they would take the job immediately and set off. Later, they rode in a carriage. Yuki was very surprised that Raven refused the order. The young man agreed, and Yuki apologized, saying he had simply misunderstood. Raven only wanted to go to the city with him. The young man smiled and said it was fine because he'd never completed an order with a friend. Yuki found the young man very kind and suggested to Raven they eat together after they finished ordering. They'll deal with him before sunset. Raven agreed with the young man, and before long, Yuki and Raven were in the forest. After defeating several monsters, the swordsman turned to Yuki and said, Raven wanted to compete with the young man when they were done here. He was surprised that he had killed someone. Yuki agrees and says you must kill the dragon first. A dragon appears after a while. Raven tells Yuki to get ready, and Yuki thinks his hide is very strong. He casts a spell and expects it to work. The young man then unleashes a storm punch that pierces the dragon's body. Raven dodges the dragon's strike. Yuki strikes again, and Raven finishes the fight with a sword thrust. The young man tells the swordsman he did well and is glad they wrapped up quickly, adding that Yuki had a great shot and they will give the rest to the guild staff. After a while, Yuki and Raven went to the tavern for a snack, and Yuki asked what Raven wanted to discuss. Raven asked if Yuki would listen, and Yuki said he would if Raven didn't mind. Raven admits he's in love. The young man felt embarrassed by what he'd said. Yuki was surprised, and Raven said he could only discuss it with the young man, so the main character wondered if Raven really wanted love advice. He asked Raven what sort of person he was. The young man replied that the girl was not laughing at his voice, but was actually jealous of it. Embarrassed, he says he doesn't know what to do, and Yuki thinks he's acting like a teenager because he's so handsome. Yuki thought Raven was a handsome member of the hero's team, and Raven overcame his insecurity about his voice, so give him a good answer. The young man jumps up and asks whether the other young man knows anything about him. Yuki shouted that the young man was tall and handsome. He was also a member of the hero's team. If his voice sounded odd, he should ignore anyone who laughed at it. He asks me to look at him. An ordinary adventurer with a blank face, he has confessed many times and been refused just as often. He says if the young man acts now, everything will be fine. Yuki tells Raven to believe in himself, and the young man agrees with the main character, saying that he is right. He seemed to be overthinking it. Raven thanks Yuki and says it's good he talked to the young man. He plans to confess to the girl tomorrow, and asks Yuki to go with him. The next day, the main character met Raven and found the young man shaking with fear. Yuki tapped the young man on the shoulder and told him to listen to him, then asked if Raven was a member of the hero's team and a night captain, saying that alone makes Raven very cool, so the young man must pull himself together and believe in himself. The main character encouraged the young man after him, told him he could do it, reminded him he was handsome, and wished him good luck. They arrived after a while, and the young man believed this was the Aquarine mansion. Raven thanked Yuki because now he could confess to the girl. He says he's gone. Yuki discovered Raven's lover was actually Cecilia. It turned out he had been helping his opponent. Moving from place to place, he thinks about how Cecilia will respond. After a while, Raven returned and told Yuki he had been rejected. Yuki said that was impossible. He thanked her for the advice. After the upset, he said he was going home. Yuki felt the damage from the first failure was too great, since he'd experienced it before. He thinks he needs to meet Cecilia. After a while, Yuki met Cecilia, but she said Raven had not come to her. This surprised him, and he thought Raven really had not come to see her. He realizes that his beloved is not Cecilia. When the girl asked what had happened, Yuki explained. Cecilia realized what was going on and suggested it might be one of the servants. Yuki brightened, and Cecilia said she would ask Sophia because Sophia might know something. They approach Sophia, and the girl confirms Mr. Raven came recently and asked them to call one of the maids. Sophia says he appears to have asked for the new happiness. Next, they come to happiness. Yuki asks if the red-haired, handsome young man recently came to the girl. He confessed to her, and the girl replied. Happiness says the girl replied that it was impossible. Yuki said the girl had met that swordsman before, so can she tell me what happened when they met? The girl yelled that she couldn't say and ran off. Yuki tries to stop her and says she'll have to come back. After a while, Yuki says he wants to discuss the situation with Happiness and Raven. Cecilia agrees she needs to help Raven and asks why Duke is here. Yuki says it's because she's known Happyings for a very long time. The girl says she will first explain what happened. Asks whether Yuki and Cecilia know that harpies are the target of the hunt, and both of them agree. Harpies are beautiful demons, and countless people capture and enslave them for their wings. Happiness was no exception. One day some people captured her and the Duke accidentally rescued her, so they became friends. That is why Happinies are not happy with a man who confesses his love to them. Cecilia looked sadly at the Duke as he spoke about it. Yuki said he didn't think Happinays had made such a bad impression on Raven. Cecilia added that Yuki had said that when she heard Raven's voice, she envied him. Duke replied that harpies are a race that liked to sing, so she might have been attracted to Raven's voice. Yuki thought it would be nice if Raven could hear it. The young man said that before leaving he would visit Raven in the knight's building. A young man enters Raven's room and finds him weak on the couch. Raven apologizes to Yuki, saying he did his best to help. Yuki says it's okay and that he wants to ask him something. Yuki asks how Raven met his beloved. The young man asks gloomily what Yuki will do when Raven finds out. Yuki says Raven gave up early, so he should tell him. Raven says he was walking the streets and saw nothing unusual until he noticed a girl in an alley with 3 men who invited her to walk with them. Raven drew his sword and pointed it at the men, and when they attacked, he struck them in the stomach. About to flee, the men said this young man was Raven from the hero's team and the captain of the knights. Upset that they had missed a very beautiful girl, the men ran away. Ravenix shouted that men are real barbarians. A girl pulled Raven back and said he had a very pleasant voice. Surprised, the young man covered his mouth when he realized he had something to say. Hepine added that he has a very pleasant voice and that she is very jealous of him. Raven was surprised and asked what the girl meant. She thanked the young man for his help, said goodbye, and left. That's how Raven met Hephanis, who then asked if that was enough for Yuki. Yuki understood that Raven wanted happiness too. Raven takes it out and says he needs to go outside. Duke greets them and calls for the captain. She approaches Raven and says this is the man who confessed to what happened. Yuki confirms and tells Raven that the girl is an acquaintance of those involved. Zook said Hephanis has a male-related injury and asks whether Raven can heal her. Yuki realized Duke had replaced people with men. Although Hephanis hates people, this does not apply to Sophia and Cecilia. Raven said he didn't know. Duke grew angry and said it would be better if the young man promised to save her. She called Raven on a whim. Angered, the young man asked the girl what she had said. Duke was furious too, and Yuki tried to calm them and prevent a fight. Duke says they could first befriend the Hephanis, and that is how Raven can help her. Soon Raven and Duke shook hands. Yuki wished Raven good luck, he thanked her, and she thinks that's how a strong friendship began. The heroes soon arrived at the manor. Hephanis swept the yard, doing her work. Raven arrived at the estate, and Yuki stood to the side and wished the young man luck. Hepine spotted the young man. Raven looked puzzled, then asked the girl whether she would be friends with him. After looking at the young man, the girl agreed to befriend Raven. In the end, everyone was happy. Yuki learned Cecilia had played a part in Hephanis' decision, and Duke joined the night squad under Raven's command. Because of that, Yuki moved in with Sheik, and the young man kept asking the captain to play with him. After a while, Yuki and Sheik boarded the carriage with Cecilia, and the young man was happy to be riding in a carriage for the first time. Sheik grinned and called the captain to look out the window. Yuki told Sheikah to calm down. The main character thought they were on their way to Degest village for work. Cecilia, being a priest, must care for people, so the young man offered to help her. When they climbed into the carriage, Sheik was already seated. The young man sulked because he thought they had left him behind. Cecilia laughed, saying he was glad Yuki and Sheik had agreed to go with him, and she thought they'd finish the work quickly, and Yuki asked the girl to rely on them. They finally reached Degaz village. Cecilia said bandits had attacked them. The headman stepped out to the group of girls, surprised that Cecilia had actually arrived. The girl looked around, said the situation was much worse than she'd thought, and asked the headman to gather all the wounded in one place. After agreeing, the headman looks at Yuki and Sheik and asks who they are, and the girl says they are her friends who came to help and are capable, so he doesn't need to worry. The headman bows, asks the boys to look after them, and says he will call everyone else. After a while, Cecilia tends to the injured. The young man also uses healing magic and notices Cecilia getting more tired. He is a cheat, and a sheik who uses medicine is one thing, but Cecilia uses magic and can run out of it quickly. So the young man turns to Cecilia and asks if it is time for her to rest. She says she's fine, then collapses, and the young man uses the Holy Bell's magic on her. He turns to the citizens and apologizes, explaining that Cecilia has reached her limit and needs to rest, then asks whether there is a place to lie down, and a citizen says there is a vacant house nearby. Yuki tells Sheik they will finish everything later. A while later, Cecilia turns to Yuki. Turning, the young man says they have already finished. Cecilia smiles wickedly and says he fully understands what the girl wants to tell him. Yuki apologizes to the girl for drugging her with magic, but says she would have fainted if she had kept going at that pace, and he adds that sometimes a girl feels like she is pushing herself too hard. Smiling, Cecilia thanked Yuki for her help and care. Yuki smiled and blushed, thinking the girl was incredibly cute. When some men approached Cecilia and Yuki, told them a girl named Till lived on the outskirts of the village, and asked if the girl could be examined too. They say the girl is not hurt, but she has been unwell since birth. Cecilia agrees and asks for directions. The men say they need to go east of the village. After a while, Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia came to a small house at the edge of the village. A girl asked who they were. Sitting on the bed reading, she said Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia were not locals. A sudden cough broke the silence. Cecilia apologized for coming uninvited. The village headman had asked them to come. Shek goes to the girl and asks her to take the medicine. Yuki told Till not to worry. Shek may look like that, but he is very smart. After a while, the girl says it became a lot easier for her. She says the girl is very lucky. When bandits attacked the village, she was not there. He gives her some medicine and tells her to drink it for a while. Suddenly, Till started fussing and said the young man was wrong because she was protected by the village's guardian god. Yuki asked which guardian god the girl meant. The girl says she heard it from her late grandmother. Her grandmother told the girl stories about him. The girl says he was the one who saved her then. Till brought an offering to the guardian god every day, as her grandmother had told her. On the day the bandits attacked the village, Till was carrying an offering, and on the way back she grew sleepy and so escaped them. Shik says the severe drowsiness comes from dark magic. Yuki calls it a nightmare sleeve, but it's the same spell that causes scary dreams. Cecilia tells Yuki the guardian god looks suspicious. Tior says there's nothing suspicious about it. Yuki asks where the guardian god is. Soon they head straight to the guardian god's temple. Thiel says the guardian god's statue is nearby, and if anyone doubts it, the girl will show them everything. Cecilia, Yuki, and Sheik looked at the scene with stone faces and agreed it plainly looked like a statue of a demon. Till shouts that she doesn't ask them whether they mock the guardian god, then starts coughing. Cecilia leads her away. Yuki watches and tells Sheik that, no matter how you look at it, the statue does not look like a guardian god. Sheik says it is more accurate to say the statue is most likely a demon. Yuki says first, these statues were not made as guardian gods, and second, they look like trap statues from the Demon King's castle, namely gargoyles. The statue's eyes light up and it comes to life. A demon attacks Yuki and Shika. Yuki says he knew it. He then asks what kind of god he would be if he were just a demon, and the young man looks at Sheik, who has disappeared. A young man with a terrifying face suddenly appeared in front of the demon and kicked it in the head. The demon collapsed, and she rejoiced at his victory. Sheik asked Yuki what they should do with the demon, and Yuki turned to the gargoyle to ask if it could speak, while the demon screamed that if they wanted to kill him they should go ahead, and Sheik, already with his blade drawn and ready to strike, was stopped by Yuki. The young man tells the demon he only wants to talk. The gargoyle asked whether they had not come to kill. Yuki replied he had attacked them first. The gargoyle bows, admits he was rude, and apologizes because he heard they recognized him, and Yuki tells him to forgive them, then asks why he calls himself the guardian god. The demon says it might be possible to tell this to the young men. This happened hundreds of years ago. He appeared to protect the temple. Back then he did nothing but sleep all day. Sheik laughed and said it was very similar to Captain Yuki. The gargoyle continued, saying one day he was sleeping as usual. While he slept, someone took him from the castle. She laughed and said it was very funny. When the demon realized it, he leaped from the cart and nearly killed these thieves, but he had never left his temple, so he could not come back. Lost, he wandered until he found the village. The thieves who had brought him there attacked the village, so he punished them. She continued to laugh. After taking revenge and calming down, he settled in this temple, and the villagers called him God. Yuki thought he was only a simple demon. The gargoyle said people later came to see him as a guardian god. One frail girl still came to the temple to clean it. When he learned that bandits had attacked, he hid the girl from them out of gratitude. Yuki asked whether he had done anything to her. The demon told her not to speak nonsense and denied it. Then he sent a sleeve of nightmares, but she was only sleeping. That ends his story, and now he wants me to tell him about the boys themselves. A while later, he laughed and said Yuki's situation was worse than his because the demon had fallen in love with a human. Yuki said there was nothing funny about it. He mimicked the demon and said he was lost like a child. She kept laughing. Yuki then suggested leaving it. He then asked if the demon was going to do something bad. The gargoyle said no and would just live in the temple, refusing to do anything about the village, not even help. And Yuki says that's fine and tells Sheik they will come back. After a while, Yuki and Sheik returned to Till's house. Cecilia laid the girl in bed, told Yuki they had done a good job, and asked whether they had learned anything. Yuki asks if Till is really asleep, then says the guardian god turned out to be a gargoyle, and there is a demon in the village that does not bother the villagers and has lived quietly for several hundred years, so Yuki thinks it will be okay. Cecilia says it's not that simple. Shik says the conversation is getting serious now, so he wants to leave here to eat. Yuki gives Shik the money and says they can buy something tasty for themselves. Shik lights up with joy. Yuki then decides to continue. He suggests keeping the gargoyle for now. They need to heal the residents and deal with the bandits, but they're just asking the residents about the gargoyle. Cecilia agrees he's right and says they should focus on treatment. Till slept soundly on the bed, and Yuki said they had to leave, but should try not to wake her. They stepped outside, and Yuki thought walking under the full moon was very romantic. Cecilia asked the young man what had happened. Yuki blushed and said it was nothing like that. They continued walking through the night forest. The next day, Yuki told Cecilia and Shika to ask the residents about the gargoyle during the treatment. Cecilia gathered herself, announced they were starting treatment, and asked the residents to line up. Immediately, the men lined up in front of Cecilia. Yuki realizes exactly what these men want. Then he hears someone thanking Shikaku. Turning around, he sees a large crowd of girls gathered around Shake and realizes Shake is very popular with young girls. The young man gathered only the elderly around him. They thanked him for saving them. Yuki wasted no time asking if they knew anything about the guardian god, and people asked the young man if he meant the demon statue that stands deep in the forest. The main character recognized the statue and said Teal had worshipped her deeply. He asked why the girl was so attached to this god. They told him that Till used to clean the statue and bring offerings, and one day Red Fang attacked her. At 7, Till was in poor health, and when she thought she was dying, the statue of the guardian god came to her aid. Still, people don't believe it. Everyone is afraid of the statue and keeps their distance. Yuki is surprised, but understands why Teal worships it so much. Eventually, Cecilia apologized, saying she had been asked too many questions and could not ask them about the gargoyle. Yuki said he would beat up those who molested the girl. The girl asks the young man to stop, saying the treatment was only delayed. Then she asks Yuki if he has found out anything. Yuki tells Cecilia everything. Cecilia says the gargoyle did not attack the residents. The main character says that from what he heard, the residents consider the gargoyle harmless. Cecilia asks to speak with him just in case. Yuki understands and tells Shik to go visit Till. The young man agrees. Later, Cecilia and Yuki reached the gargoyle, and the demon grew angry and asked whether they had been telling people about him. Cecilia Boasen says her name is Cecilia. After bandits attacked the village, she came here to treat the residents. The demon said she was the girl Yuki had mentioned. He then asked what she wanted from him. The girl asked whether the demon really would not attack the village. The demon said he had already told the child he had no interest in attacking it, and that he simply lives here. Cecilia realizes this is exactly what she was told. Yuki then said he wanted to ask something. The young man asks if the gargoyle likes cute girls. The gargoyle didn't understand what that meant, and Yuki realized the word didn't exist in this world. The gargoyle demanded to know what the word meant. Yuki said it was a word from his old world. Eventually, the gargoyles were told everything. The demon insisted he would never do such a thing and would never care for little people. The gargoyle ordered the young man not to look at him that way. He said that once their conversation was over, he went to bed, and they did not dare tell the girl about his true form. A little later, Yuki and Cecilia headed back to the village, and Cecilia asked whether the young man himself looked after the young children. Smiling, Yuki told Cecilia not to worry because he only loved her. Cecilia blushed and asked him not to say that. Yuki cut her off and said they needed to get back to Shika and Till. After a while, Till told Sheka to wait. The girl beamed and said she had so much to tell the young man about the guardian god. Shek grew very upset and began to cry. Till held the young man's hand, beaming and crying as she held out his hand to the captain, begging for salvation. Yuki watched in silence, taking it all in. Till asked Yuki and Cecilia to listen to her stories too. Yuki scratched his head, apologized to Till, and said they had to get up early tomorrow, so they would go home. Cheek shouted at the captain and cried, but the young man told him to come back for dinner. After a while, Yuki and Cecilia headed home, and the girl asked him if everything would be all right with the sheik. The young man agreed and said Teal would have fun. Then Yuki took Cecilia by the crayfish and warned her to be careful because it was dark, and Cecilia agreed and thanked him. Cecilia looked at Yuki, who blushed and looked away. She smiled and felt embarrassed too, so they returned home in complete silence. Late that night, the main character was sleeping in his guest house. Suddenly, he wakes up to see the headman burst into the house, begging for help and announcing that the village had been attacked by bandits. Yuki sprang out of bed and told Shika to get up. Shika couldn't rise and mumbled that he'd only just fallen asleep. Swords rang across the village as villagers fought the bandits. Cecilia rushed up to the main character. She remained alert. Yuki told Cecilia the villagers had started defending themselves, but most were wounded and could not repel the attack. Sleepy Sheik approached Cecilia and Yuki. Yuki told the young man to pack up, then turned to Cecilia and asked for her support. Cecilia agreed and hurried off with the young man. Shekayand left, and then City took off. The young man suddenly jumped up and landed right behind the bandit. The man turned and asked angrily what kind of child he was. Suddenly, she jumped high and kicked the bandit in the head while in midair. The other men saw him but had no time to react. A young woman had clearly taken out most of the bandits. Cecilia was amazed by how strong Sheik was. Yuki said he easily fools his enemies with his agility. The young man said this person was his subordinate. The main character added that he needs to get to work now too. Cecilia used her magic and promised to support the young man. The protagonist believed he couldn't use large-scale magic here. Yuki casts the storm drill spell and impales a man who is attacking a young man. The protagonist turned and saw smoke rising from Till's house. Calling to Sheik, the main character told him to run to Till's house and said they could handle it here, and the young man said he understood before running toward Till's house. After a moment, the main character exhaled and wiped sweat from his face as the villagers cheered while dealing with the bandits. Yuki soon realized Sheik still hadn't returned. Believing she had finally shaken off the bandits, the main character relaxed. Cecilia approached the young man, puzzled by his seriousness. Yuki said he had a bad feeling about it. He headed for Till's house while Cecilia called after him. Yuki ran to the right spot and was stunned to find Till hugging a wounded gargoyle while Sheik shielded them from a young man with a sword. Shock made the protagonist's eyes go wide. He tried to ask me what was happening, but I couldn't speak. The stranger turned toward them and demanded to know what was happening. At first he thought Yuki and Cecilia were villagers, but when he saw the girl, he said he knew her. Cecilia also recognized the young man, and Sheik suddenly rushed at the stranger and tried to attack him, but the young man defended himself with a sword and told Sheik to stop attacking. The stranger shoved the young man while shouting at him. The Sheik flew off and hit a tree. They called his name right away. Yuki noticed his angry look, but he grabbed his shoulder and ordered him to stop. Yuki told everyone to calm down and asked what had happened here. Sheik said the gargoyle was protecting Till from bandits, but he was suddenly attacked from behind. Surprised, the young man asked what was wrong with killing demons. He believed he had killed him, and felt that if the young man was responsible for him, he should teach him manners. She began trembling and crying, and the young man asked why he was crying, so let him then be silent. Suddenly, Yuki attacked a young man. During the attack, the main character realized his magic had vanished and felt stunned. Cecilia shouted at Yuki to stop because his magic was useless against this young man. Yuki asked Cecilia if she truly knew this man. Cecilia said the young man was a hero of the Gareth Empire named Meera. His sword, the magic absorber, absorbs magic. That is why he will not be able to use the attack. Yuki cut her speech short and asked if there were any other heroes besides the ones everyone knew, and the girl explained they were heroes from different kingdoms. Cecilia said other kingdoms had their own heroes, but only they had reached the Demon Lord's castle. Yuki thought he simply didn't know. Since the magic absorber was developed in the Empire, it has several abilities, and the Empire also makes magic swords, with spears and hammers available too. And the young man then turned to her and asked if she planned to talk for a long time. Waving his sword, he told them to finish up. Yuki told Meera to wait and explained the gargoyle was only protecting Till. It doesn't attack people. The young man asked Yuki what he meant, since he was only killing demons. Cecilia turned to Yuki and told him he didn't have a hero's pride. To become a hero, Yuki realized you need a reason to kill demons. Meera said accepting guild orders must be a chore. His only aim was to kill the demon, and he grinned maliciously. The young man kicks the Till away, but the girl grabs his leg and won't let him, trying to protect her guardian god. The young man replied that Till had been bothering him, so he was ready to kill her too. Cecilia asked him to wait and says that, as a hero of the Gareth Empire, He is really going to raise his hand against the people of the kingdom of Clarence. Grinning, the young man said he did not know, and that if he wanted to, he would definitely raise his hand, then pointed his sword directly at Cecilia and asked whether the daughter of the Akurin family would really go against him. Yuki then takes Cecilia by the shoulder and pulls her aside. Cecilia turns and calls Yuki's name. The young man looks at Yuki and asks if the young man really wants to fight him, then calls him a redneck with a grin. Yuki studies the young man, then looks at Mr. Gargoyle and thinks the gargoyle looks terrible because his arms and wings were cut off. He watched the sobbing girl. Because of those two things, and for pointing a sword at Cecilia, the hero would never forgive the young man. He tells him to get ready because he will show him hell. Yuki Vin unleashes her magic. Laughing, the young man says it's useless because her magic won't affect him. He then holds a sword in front of him and absorbs all of Yuki's magic. Grint, the main character, said he was only greeting the young man. He then cast another spell, but the young man's sword absorbed the magic. Smiling, he said he already considered Yuki's magic useless, then asked whether Yuki would use a weapon, and the main character replied, smiling, that unfortunately he could only use magic. Waving his sword, the young man said this move would make Yuki lose to him. Blades from the sword flew towards Cecilia and Yuki. Using his magic, the main character protected Cecilia. He felt very pleased that his beloved girlfriend was worried about him, but if he delayed any longer, Cecilia and the others might suffer. Releasing more magical power, he asks the young man if he can absorb it. Holding his sword out, the young man tenses and grits his teeth as an overwhelming surge of magic hits him and his blade starts to crack. Yuki suddenly appears in front of him and punches the young man. Yuki says he got caught. The young man passes out, and Yuki grins, saying he shouldn't have angered such a great him. Cecilia praises Yuki and then asks if it was necessary to get into that position. And Yuki says that when something switches in him, he acts a bit differently. He looks at the lying Shik and says he hopes he's okay. Cecilia said he wasn't seriously injured and would recover in 2 or 3 days. The young man Yuki had recently defeated came to his senses and threw a sword straight at the gargoyle, but Yuki noticed it too late. The blade flew straight at the gargoyle's head, but Till appeared in front of the demon, who shielded him from the blow. The blade pierced Till's body and she began to fall, losing consciousness. Yuki caught her and tried to pull the blade free, but he felt it was too late, and he failed. Cecilia rushed toward Yuki and immediately began casting healing magic. The gargoyle faced the girl and asked why she had sacrificed herself. Tull said the demon had saved her so many times that she wanted to thank him, and her energy was fading. The young man rose and said Till had interrupted him again, and he did not think the magic absorber could ever break. Smiling, he said today had been fun and that he would forgive them all this time. Yuki looked at him and asked if he really thought he could get away so easily. Laughing, the young man told Yuki not to be foolish, formed a bow of wind, fired the arrows straight into the sky, and used the hail of arrows skill. Seeing how bad things were, Yuki used magic to destroy all the remaining arrows. Yuki looked around but saw no one. The young man ran off. Yuki apologized to Cecilia, admitting it was his fault because he had been inconsiderate. Cecilia looked at him and said he didn't need to apologize because she couldn't have done anything either. Yuki ground his teeth, ashamed that his superior physique and endless magic were just cheats he relied on, so he thought he could handle it easily. In this world, he was not as skilled as he thought, so he kept staring at the gargoyle, Shika, and Cecilia. Yuki turned to Cecilia and asked if the villagers really shouldn't come here. Cecilia paused and said she did not think they would. Suddenly, wings burst from Yuki's back and a horn grew on his head, and Cecilia was frightened by his demonic appearance. He vowed he would catch up with the world and destroy it. The girl recoiled in horror, but Yuki smiled gently and told her not to worry because he would only inflict a few wounds on him. Cecilia looked unsure when the young man told her to take care of Till while he was away, then watched Yuki's silhouette recede into the sky. A young man chased after the world, put on a scarf, and thought it was a good idea. Yuki spots her target wandering among the trees. The target lands on the ground, and Meera turns around abruptly. He goes quiet, trying to figure out where the other demon came from. Suddenly, Yuki vanishes from his sight. Mary realized where the demon had gone when his head was pinned to the ground by the Yuki River. Then Yuki jumped back, and Meera asked what he needed. Yuki asked whether the young man with a cruel look had really cut off his subordinate's arms and wings. Furious, he said the young man deserved only death for what he did to his loyal servant. Laughing, Meera said it would be difficult, but that he only had to kill the demon. He charged straight at Yuki, who did not move until the last moment. Meera ordered him to die. Yuki opened his eyes and kicked Meera, sending the young man flying to the side and crashing through trees. Clearing his throat, the young man said the demon king had already been killed and asked why such powerful demons still remained. At that moment, Yuki came up to him and said he was very weak, and the main character realized he was not an ordinary person, but a dangerous demon. Meera snatches a dagger and attacks the demon. You anticipate his attack and move to the side, surprised the young man would consider killing him so quickly. Yuki grabbed the young man's arm, and he realized it was of no use. The main character unleashed fire magic and struck Meera with all his strength to leave him powerless. Yuki grabbed the young man's collar and flew into the sky. Meera asked where the demon was taking him, and Yuki said the young man was not worthy to die by Yuki's hand. They reached a river with a strong current. Meera shouted that it couldn't be. He screamed that he was going to kill the damn demon. Yuki let go, and Meera began to fall straight into the depths of the water. Yuki believed this river led to the Garrus Empire, so if the young man was lucky, he would return home. Yuki's sinister form evaporates, and he returns to his normal appearance. The young man says it's time to return to Cecilia, and knows this appearance is not appropriate, so he must now remove the rock and the wings, which will be very painful. After throwing Meera into the river, Yuki returned to Cecilia, and Meera was deeply worried about the young man because of his demonic appearance. The young man doesn't want to be in that form because he now lives as a man named Yuki. The next day, Till survived and was healed by magic, or perhaps because a gargoyle had been holding your hand the whole time. Shake sank into deep sadness over the loss. Yuki hopes Duke happens and Cecilia will help him when they return. Today is also the day they leave the village, and they must say goodbye to Teal and everyone else. A scream rings out from Till's house. Yuki bursts through the door and calls the girl's name. Till woke relieved that the guardian god had come to her house, said the house was dirty, apologized and offered to leave immediately, but the gargoyle told her to go to bed because she was not cured yet. Cecilia and Yuki watched everything. The gargoyle ordered Till to lie down immediately. He turned to Cecilia and Yuki for help, warning that if this continues, the girl will only get worse. Then Till turned to the guardian god and made a humble request that he call her by her first name, Till. The gargoyle agreed, called the girl by name, and told her to lie down until she felt better. The girl screamed with delight at being called by name and felt she could die. Later, Tilla apologized to everyone for her behavior because Yuki and Cecilia had even come to her house, and Cecilia replied that nothing was wrong and everything was fine. Feel says it's good they came because she wants to talk to them. Yuki asks what the girl wanted to talk about. The girl asks whether Yuki and Cecilia can take her and the guardian god with them to Minerva. The gargoyle was surprised by the girl's request. Bowing, the girl asked again and explained that healing magic couldn't help the guardian god, but they might find help in Minerva. Yuki expected it would be easy to gather information about everything in Minerva, and he asks Cecilia what she thinks. The girl says it's impossible because Till hasn't fully recovered and bringing a gargoyle into the city would be very difficult. Yuki tells Cecilia he has an idea. After a while, Yuki tells everyone his plan. Cecilia considers it carefully and says that if everyone thinks it through, things might work out. Yuki says everything is fine. Then Till starts to celebrate and throws his arms around the gargoyle's neck, saying it's all very beautiful. While the gargoyle, for his part, tells everyone to wait because he hasn't agreed yet. Embarrassed, the demon agreed, while Yuki and Cecilia watched and whispered that the gargoyle could not refuse Till. Having finished all the chores, Cecilia, Till, and Sheik left the village. They had lived here for about a week, so they will miss this place. Cecilia noticed Yuki loading a statue onto the carriage, asked the young man about it, and he said it was a gargoyle. Using his magic, he turned the gargoyle into a statue. After being treated, Teal would live and work in the Aquaron family mansion. Celia only asked her not to overwork, and Teal was happy, saying cleaning was normal for her. Yuki turned to Celia and said he wanted to keep the statue in their mansion, but she refused. She told Yuki that if he wanted to keep the statue, it had to be very beautiful. Yuki realized she was stating what he already believed. Teal refused to beg for a gargoyle, so the young man left the gargoyle at home. After a while, Duke kicked the door down, and then Eyes, who was standing next to Yuki, burst into the room. Both girls were calling the captain. Duke entered the room, turned to the young man, and asked where the bad man who had upset her was. Yuki was frightened by the girls' sudden appearance. They stood there looking menacing. Duke said they would kill the man and added they would do it with extreme brutality. Yuki put his hands in front of him, asked the girls to wait, then asked who had told them about it. They planned to celebrate Sheik's return, but he was very sad and told them everything himself. Yuki told everyone to calm down, saying he'd taken care of everything, already broken a couple of bones, and thrown them into the river. The Duke told the captain it was too soft, and said they needed to break every bone before throwing him into the sea. Happens added that the man should be crushed. Yuki silently asked the girls not to say such cruel things. He said he had already beaten him up anyway. The young man asked about the girls' work. Duke said they would be back quickly, and Yuki screamed, asking whether they were really going to quit their jobs. Duke objected to the captain and said she was very worried about this. Yuki thought that no matter how much he told him, it would not do any good. He said Cecilia would definitely be able to help, calming him easily and not leaving him if she sees he's depressed. The Duke confirmed it. Yuki asked them to trust Cecilia, and Hephanes agreed with him. Then Duke changed the subject and turned to the captain, while she wanted to ask him what it was. The girl pointed at the statue. She admitted the statue is very scary and doesn't fit in this room, and Duke offered to throw it away, glad he had called it garbage. At that moment the gargoyle heard everything. Shaking with anger, he shifted into his true form and said he didn't like that form either. Duke drew her sword and Happens began to cast a spell, and Yuki told them to stop fighting immediately, warning that someone would have to pay if anything got broken. Eventually, Yuki and the gargoyle talked about everything. Duke realized the situation and apologized to the gargoyle for drawing his sword. Yuki introduced herself as a Doolaham and said, Happy Niz was a harpy. The gargoyle said he had no name, but was pleased to meet the girls. Duke said the lack of a name was very inconvenient. Hapini then suggested they call him Gaius. Duke said it sounded like a man's name and was really cool. The gargoyle told them to call him whatever they wanted. Yuki felt they had become friends very quickly, which was a good thing. Duke asked Guy if the captain had really done this to him. It was awful, and he added that it was tasteless. Guy said he thought so too, but there was nothing he could do. Yuki had already started to get angry, and was about to tell the guys to stop, when he suddenly heard a knock at the door, so he turned quickly and used magic on Guy. Sophia entered the room, and the girl said Happings was here after all, and that yesterday she had instructed her to take care of the new girl. Facing the commotion, she gave a threatening look and said she had no time for entertainment, and frightened, she begged the boss to forgive her as Sophia dragged Happings along. Turning to Yuki, Sophia apologized for being annoying and asked about the statue. Raven appeared behind Sophia and told Duke he would go to Daga village that day to get those bandits, so he waited for Duke. Raven then turned to Yuki and said the young man could join their assignment if he had time. Yuki agreed and waved at the young man. Sophia turned to them and said she was done with the statue, and it would be better to throw it away. Guy turned to the young man and asked what he had turned him into now. Yuki said he thought being a sphinx was a good idea. Realizing he's been reborn into this world, he suddenly feels the beauty here is very different. He tells Guy he's heading to the guild since he hasn't been there in a long time. Guy shouts after him, asking whether he really wants to leave him like that. After a while, Yuki arrives at the Adventurers Guild but does not see his claim here. He turns to the receptionist. The girl recognizes the main character and says he is the one who often talks to the Vice Guild Master. Yuki doesn't know who she means, so he asks her to explain. Yuki grew puzzled when the girl said again that the young man often spoke with Clayman, a Vice Guild Master. When the girl asked if the young man was okay, he said he was fine, apologized, and added that he had simply thought Clayman did not look like a Vice Guild Master. The receptionist laughed and said she understood the young man very well, but Clement actually does the whole job. The day she joked about a guild-wide vacation during the Heroes Parade, he ended up working for them for 3 days, and Yuki realized that was when he arrived in the city. Yuki asked the girl what had happened to Clayman today. The girl whispered that it involved the guild's honor, so she could not tell him out loud. After hearing the claim, she seemed to have argued with his wife. He has been in the hospital for a month now. Yuki was very surprised. Sitting on the hospital bed after a while, Clayman asks Yuki why he came, and Yuki gives him a bag of treats and says Clayman is here because of the quarrel, prompting Clayman to ask what he did. Clayman said the quarrel was over their wedding anniversary. Yuki said he understood and assumed Clayman had simply forgotten her. The man grew angry and said he remembered her, but buying a gift was such a hassle that he kept putting it off. On the anniversary, he spent the day frantically searching for a gift. Night came quickly, and when he arrived home, her face was terrifying. Yuki shouted that it was all Clayman's fault and told him to apologize to his wife immediately. And Clayman said she wasn't mad anymore and would come home after work. Then, Clayman Grind asked if the young man was truly jealous because his wife took care of him. And Yuki was silent for a while before remembering Celia's words about how Sophia's husband fully recovered 6 months after their quarrel. Yuki asked Clayman about his wife's job, and he said she worked as a maid in the mansion and was the head maid. Yuki asked whether Clayman's wife was named Sophia. The man was surprised that Yuki knew her. The young man said he knew a girl from the Aquarain family who had introduced him to the maids. When Yuki asked how Clayman met Sophia, the man smiled, asked why Yuki was so interested, and agreed to tell the story, starting by saying Clayman had been a genius since childhood. By 18, he was a lone A-rank adventurer, and everything felt easy, so life was boring. A girl reached out and told him he seemed free now. That girl was Sophia. She said the young man looked very strong and invited him to join the team. Someone thought the girl was very beautiful. Drunk, he immediately started hugging, but before he knew it, Sophia had beaten him up. Saying this girl had beaten him so easily was shocking. After that, he asked to join her team, and together they were incredibly strong. Clayman said people called them an invincible, apathetic couple. Yuki found the name very strange. The man said the people themselves called them that. At first, they didn't admit their feelings to each other, but over time they fell in love. Together, Sophia was radiant, and the man, finally enjoying life, decided to propose to her. After dinner at a restaurant, Clayman took out his wedding ring and asked Sophia to marry him, and she agreed because the proposal was perfect. When the man spoke again, she beat him up and he spent 6 months in treatment. The claimant said Sophia asked for a job as an adventurer and wanted to continue, but he only objected because he feared for her safety, and he tried to persuade her after she beat him. But she agreed in the end. Yuki announces they are now married and happily living together. Clayman is delighted and replies warmly. Suddenly, the hospital room door opens and Sophia comes in. He gently calls Clayman and says she has come for him. Sophia spots Yuki and asks what he is doing here. Yuki smiles and says he met Clayman at the guild, so he came to check on him. A broad smile crossed his face when his beloved wife came to check on him. Sophia kicked the man in the head and asked which lover he meant. Claym unheld his head, and she said the man always calls her by her first name. McSheena said he had seen what was under the girl's skirt, and she agreed. Yuki was surprised, but Sophia told him Clayman was her husband, so everything was fine. Helping the man to his feet, the girl bows to Yuki, tells him they are leaving, and thanks him for visiting her husband. Later, the young man came home, remembered watching the lovebirds and feeling jealous, hugged his pillow and thought how much he wanted to see Cecilia. The next day, Yuki lay on his bed, completely exhausted, when Guy took the form of a Sphinx statue and told him to stop because he was starting to get annoyed. Yuki turns to Gaius, who tells the young man that if he wants to see a girl, he should simply go to her. The young man wants to approach the girl but can't. Cecilia's job is more complicated than the young man thought, so you can't just go to her. At that moment, he was using magic. Guy asked him to stop. Yuki still made the gargoyle into a work of art and felt the statue looked great. Guy asked if the young man was really bullying him. Someone knocked on the young man's door, and when Cecilia asked if he was home, Yuki was very surprised to hear her voice. He shouted that he was home and asked them to wait a while. Cecilia and the activity behind her then caught his eye. The girl was delighted to see the young man. Yuki lit up when he saw Cecilia, but then he mentioned that Happens was with her as well. The girl asked why the young man was staring at her. Cecilia apologized for arriving so suddenly and asked if they were bothering Yuki. He said they did not interfere at all. Cecilia came to him on her own, so today will be wonderful. Then the girls enter the room where the young man is. The girls entered Yuki's room, and Happy Knees started looking around. But Yuki doesn't understand why the girl is acting that way, and then Happy Knees suddenly asked where the gargoyle was. Yuki pointed at the statue and said it was here. Happy Knees narrowed her eyes and told Yuki it was just terrible, and he could not understand why she did not appreciate his work. The young man asked what Cecilia thought. Cecilia panicked, and when Yuki said he thought it turned out very well, she replied that the statue was quite unusual. Yuki believed everyone liked it, but he realized art was difficult, and they misunderstood him again. Yuki changed the subject and asked why the two girls were together today. Cecilia said it was the day off, so they decided to go for a walk, and she asked whether it would bother Yuki and Guy, but the young man said everything was fine. Cecilia said she'd been at their place a lot lately, asked if he was okay, and then sat down on the bed right next to Yuki. The main character said Cecilia had noticed anyway and added they owed them so much, which made Yuki wonder if she had done something wrong, and Cecilia said everything was fine while her mother took the young man to the man or to herself. Cecilia grew confused and asked if it was a kidnapping, but Yuki said it was Cecilia, and since they had similar styles, it was fine. Yuki asked if Shik had recovered. Cecilia apologized that she was busy and rarely at home, so she didn't know. Happiness interrupted and said she could tell them everything. Celia noticed the sheikh had changed a lot, and when she arrived at the manor, she asked him what had happened. Exceptionally talented, she had never lost to anyone. After his first loss, he didn't know what to do and felt crushed, and Celia hugged him while he let out everything he'd been holding in. After crying himself to sleep, he began spending nights at the manor and gradually felt much better. Cecilia smiled and said her mom was wonderful. Her mom works as a healer, so Cecilia respects her deeply. Yuki smiled as she thought about how Cecilia had healed Sheka's heart. Happy Nays said Cecilia had healed the girl's heart. Yuki added that Cecilia should have mentioned it earlier. That comment was wrong because it makes Cecilia sound like a kidnapper. Yuki said he wanted to talk to Cecilia about Sheik, which surprised the girl, and he says Cecilia has become much closer to her mother. He is confident everything will be fine and Celia will handle the role. Cecilia smiled and agreed with the young man. Then the young man changed the subject and said his friend had been released from the hospital yesterday, and that friend turned out to be Sophia's husband, the head maid at the estate where Cecilia lives, and Cecilia was just as surprised as Yuki when he found out. Clenching her fist, Yuki thinks about how he is married now and feels jealous as he enjoys himself. Smiling, Cecilia said she had also heard that Sophia had gone to see her husband. Although he was initially admitted to the hospital after she beat him, Sophia said she spent their anniversary alone, so he was paid for it. Cecilia asked Happinese if the girl had seen the head maid today, and Happinese said she had, and that it had been very scary. She began to tremble and said Sophia was smiling, and the young man assumed the girl was probably feeling well, but wondered why Sophia's smile had frightened Happinese so much. Yuki said he didn't want to hear Clayman and Sophia's love stories anymore, and was more interested in when they were both adventurers. And Cecilia said her mother had told her about that, so Yuki asked her to tell him more. Cecilia started the story. This happened before Sophia and Clayman began dating. Sophia always felt uneasy forming teams. She had been on several teams before, but none suited her completely, and they often argued with her and repeatedly removed her for any reason. They took on risky assignments, and her teammates often suffered serious injuries. Sophia felt constantly guilty. Only Clayman complained about everything, yet he never left her side. One day, a girl suggested that if everything annoyed him, they should disband the team. Clayman was surprised and said he was annoyed by the task itself, not by Sophia, so he refused to disband the team. From that moment on, Sophia fell in love with Clayman. Yuki held his head and said it looked like a love story. Cecilia began to giggle. Another memory came back to her. While Mr. Clayman stayed in his seat, other men were molesting Sophia because she was very nice. Clayman cut them off and asked what they should do, scratching his head as he said other people seemed to be hitting on the girl. He called Sophia to go to another bar since there was nothing he could do about it. Then a man stopped Clayman and demanded not to be ignored. Clayman apologized, sat the man down, and said it was time to stop. After the stranger put his hand on the girl's shoulder, Sophia spun and kicked him, sending him flying to the far end of the bar, and everyone was horrified at what the couple could do. They have been called unwavering since then. Later at another bar, Clayman said it had been a difficult day, but time with Sophia was priceless for him. Yuki rubbed his head again and said it was those annoying love stories once more, and Cecilia laughed awkwardly again. Then the girl said she noticed the happyings had fallen asleep. The young man watched the sleeping girl and wondered when she had climbed onto the bed. Cecilia said it was time for them to go. Then she woke up happy knees. Cecilia said they would go and added that the young man would not refuse to visit Clarence Castle with her. Yuki asked what that meant, but Cecilia said she hoped the young man would agree and then said goodbye to him. A few days later, the main character had to go to the castle. The castle was much larger than he expected. Yuki asked why they had been called to the castle. Cecilia said she would explain everything now. Yuki looked at his happy face and thought the old sheik had returned. Cecilia said the three of them went to Dagus village. Yuki says it happened. The girl continues and says she has reported this to Clarence Castle. Dealing with the bandits and treating the villagers was fine. She did not mention any information about men, so that is not an issue either. Yuki assumes only one thing remains, that it is all about that terrible hero from another country. Noticing Shik's worry, Yuki put a hand on the young man's head to comfort him, and Shik smiled, said he was already fine, and resolved to become stronger so he would not lose to anyone. He promised Celia that as soon as he got stronger, he would beat this hero with all his might. Cecilia giggled, and Yuki smiled awkwardly as he thought about the strange expression on the young man's face. Cecilia exhaled and said that, as Yuki had said, it was about the hero from the Garrus Empire who had been snooping around their kingdom. But the real problem was how they had managed to defeat him. The official account says they used several weapons, trapped him, and finally dumped him in the river. The girl gives Yuki the report so he can read it himself. The report also mentions a sword that absorbs magic, so it was clear the girl could not have defeated it alone. They suspected something, which is why they were called to the castle. Yuki says they have to keep quiet, and their main problem now is the young man Yuki and Cecilia have turned on. While Sheik stood there not understanding why the two were looking at him. Cecilia turned to Sheik, panicked, and told him to be careful. Yuki ordered him to listen closely and not cause any unnecessary trouble. Sheik said he understood everything. After a while, the three arrived for an audience at the royal castle. A man met them and introduced himself as Prince Clarence Alter, who was also the current king of Clarence. Yuki, Sheik, and Cecilia knelt before the king. The king laughed and said it was too formal and asked them to speak normally. Sylvia, standing next to the king, said he shouldn't do that because, as king, he had to behave properly. The prince laughed and asked her not to be too gloomy. Yuki had heard that thanks to his talent, the third prince won major victories in just 15 years and became king at 25. But Yuki, though aware of his youth, had pictured him differently. Cecilia looked like she was used to it, so the young man assumed it happened all the time. Seeing Shika, Yuki realized he had fallen asleep. Sylvia turned to the king and said they could resume the audience. The prince laughed and apologized to the girl after he suddenly drifted into a private world for the two of them. The king addresses Yuki, Shika, and Cecilia, saying he called them here because of what happened in Dagus village. The report has no obvious problems, but he still doesn't understand something, so he turns to Cecilia Aquarine of the Hero Squad, though she's already there, and doubts their company can stand up to the hero of the Garrus Empire. He says Yuki, who accompanied the girl, is only an adventurer with a rank, and nothing is known about that boy. And at the same time, Yuki was trying to wake Shika up. Wanting to see what the young man can do, the king asks if she would fight Sylvia right now. Suddenly, the young man jumps up and says he doesn't mind. Sylvia pulls out her sword threateningly and says we should start right away. She makes a horizontal swing, but he jumps up to dodge. The king smiles and says that's very good. Swinging again, the girl jumps up and twists in the air. In the next attack, she brings her sword down from above, but the young man twists several times in the air and bounces off her. Putting her sword away, the girl says, Sheik moves well and is very capable for his age. The king agrees and says he will believe Cecilia, Shika, and Yuki. Cecilia is very nervous and thanks the king. The king laughs and tells her to relax because he knew it all along. The knights told him everything and inspected the battlefield. Besides, if they had lost, they would not have come back here on their own feet. He had only meant to prank them. Cecilia was shaking with shame and resentment. The man asked her not to be offended. They had done well in the village, so he said we needed to decide on a reward for them. He had called them here for that. Yuki thought about what to give. That word sounded sweet. He thought the award was wonderful and pictured Cecilia. Lost in a daydream, Yuki said he wanted Cecilia to be his girlfriend. Cecilia was stunned by Yuki's words. At that moment, the main character realized he had said all this out loud. News that Yuki wanted Cecilia to be his girlfriend spread through the castle. Darts, Sylvia, and Sheik stared at Yuki in shock. The young man realized he had accidentally spoken his thoughts aloud and wondered how Cecilia would react. The protagonist turns to the girl and sees surprise on her face. She closes her eyes and fixes an intimidating stare on Yuki. The young man realizes he is finished. Sylvia suddenly shouted that Yuki was a scoundrel. His Highness said he should choose a reward and accused the young man of daring to speak so shamefully. Yuki was startled by the girl's screams. Unsure what to do, he looked toward Sheik, who was laughing and clutching his stomach, and at Cecilia, who was covering her face with her hands. Suddenly, Yuki heard laughter from the side. The king asked whether the whole situation was interesting. The young man did not understand what the king was saying, but he thought it meant he was saved. Cecilia turns to him and says that when they return, he must face the consequences. Yuki felt he was not saved. Laughing, the king said Cecilia and Yuki seemed to be getting along well. Yuki asked if it really looked that way, and as the king was about to continue talking about the young man's reward, Yuki interrupted him. He asked the man to forget what he'd said, and explained that he'd gotten nervous and blurted out something he shouldn't have. Stunned, the main character lost his composure. The king said he had no idea they had such an interesting man in the kingdom. Had he met him earlier, he would have put him in the heroes group. Yuki said that would be too much because he was from the rank. Turning to Yuki, the king explained his position on the request, apologized, and said he could not ignore Aquaran's opinion. Yuki realized the king was feeling guilty. He asked him not to feel guilty, and Cecilia never expected to hear that from the king. The man then turns to Cecilia Aquaran and asks what kind of award she would like. Cecilia replies that she needs nothing. Serving the kingdom is reward enough for her. The man praised the girl's loyalty to the kingdom as truly admirable. Adding her to the heroes group was the right decision. He asked whether the other members were in good health. Cecilia confirms this and says everyone has returned to their normal lives, adding that Yuga took charge of foreign policy and destroying A-rank monsters. Makana was also appointed to the prestigious role of court witch. Raven became the captain of the castle knights. Cecilia set out as a wandering priestess to help others. Though each followed a different path, they are united in their aspirations. The king hopes they will continue serving for the benefit of the country. The girl agrees. The man realizes he almost forgot and turns to Sheik to ask what reward he would like. After a moment's thought, the young man said he would like many sweets. After a while, Yuki, Cecilia, and Sheik return home. Yuki watches the smiling man. The main character thinks they were summoned to the castle just to return later with a basket of sweets. It was good the King of Darts proved so open, and he told them they could come again if they had time. Even worse, this young man is more shameful. Cecilia calls and asks him to come over so they can talk. Yuki shudders and nods in agreement. Sheik says goodbye to the girl inside Yuki and adds that he will go share sweets with the others. The main character felt wonderful being alone with his girlfriend in her room and was so excited he didn't know what to do. That's not the case right now because Cecilia was very intimidating. Approaching Yuki, the girl asks if there is anything he should be told, and the young man immediately falls at her feet, says he has something to say, then apologizes, and Cecilia asks what he was thinking, for which he apologizes. Yuki says he confessed to her in front of the audience. It was really awful. She agrees with him. She asks him not to assume she hates him, but discussing it in public is truly terrible. Surprised, Yuki thinks the girl is really crying and apologizes to her. The thought of the award made his head spin at that moment. Cecilia says they have something else to discuss. The young man agrees. Celia suddenly entered the room and asked Cecilia if she had returned. The woman then noticed a strange pause and asked Yuki and Cecilia what was going on. The girl told her mother everything. Her mother realized Yuki had behaved very badly. She asked whether it was possible to confess to a girl in that kind of setting. There was no atmosphere for it at all. Cecilia told her mother she had misunderstood everything. Her mother asked if Yuki knew they needed to pick the right time and place for something like that. Screaming, she tells the young man he must understand that with this attitude, Cecilia could be taken by another man, and questions whether a young man would normally realize that, while Yuki shouted he would never allow it. The thought of Cecilia marrying someone else terrifies him, and he is even willing to use a demon's power. Celia laughed and asked if the young man was really planning how he would destroy the other man. The young man began to deny it. The woman said it was good he was reacting that way, and Cecilia added that it was completely useless. The woman said this proved the young man's feelings were sincere. Yuki scratched his head and said it still wasn't enough, and Cecilia said she thought the young man was really thinking something strange, but Yuki denied it all. With a giggle, Celia said, "Yuki and Cecilia really look good together." Both of them blushed slightly. The woman thought Yuki seemed really serious about Cecilia. She thinks they will make a really good couple. Yuki wanted Cecilia to be careful right then. Cecilia sighed and agreed. Celia wondered what Yuki was thinking right now, then announced he would not be allowed to see Cecilia for a whole month starting now. He needed to learn how to behave around girls. Panicking, the young man asked Celia for at least 2 weeks, but she refused him. Cecilia said she thinks the main character has already thought enough about his behavior and will not do it again. Celia smiled and asked whether the girl couldn't stand it for a month. Cecilia looked confused and couldn't find the words. Smiling, the woman said she would shorten the deadline to 2 weeks. After that, the young man could see Cecilia. That could strengthen their relationship. Standing on the street, the young man thought the breakup might somehow strengthen their relationship, believed crying would not ease his grief, and remembered how Celia had ordered Sophia to take him out of the manor. The kindness in Cecilia's smile at that moment brought tears to his eyes. The young man promised himself he would never give up. When he and Cecilia meet again, their bond will be stronger. One day he will confess his feelings to her again. After a while, the young man opens his eyes and sees he has taken on a demonic form and tries to figure out what this place is and where he is. Then someone called his name and Yuki saw Cecilia, who asked if he was really the Yuki she knew because he looked so strange now. The girl admits she did it. The young man is surprised, yet his demonic appearance disappears. Cecilia asks if the young man remembers anything. Yuki apologizes and says his brain is not working at all, and he understands nothing. The girl offers her hand to the young man and invites him to join her, and Yuki takes it and asks where they are going. Standing in a field of flowers, Cecilia approaches the young man and clings to him. He calls her by her first name. The young man looks at the girl, asks her to marry him, and she accepts. The girl then leans in and offers a kiss. Startled, the young man says her name, then suddenly wakes up and kisses the pillow. Yuki fell silent. The man, frozen like a statue, was quiet too. Then the young man insisted it was only a dream and his vivid imagination. Hiding his face in his hands, he thought about why Cecilia agreed at that moment. That dream has haunted him since they broke up 2 weeks ago. Suddenly the young man turned to Guy, grabbed him, and asked if Guy was really sending him those dreams. The gargoyle did not understand anything Yuki said, so he avoided looking like a fool, because he could not believe this dream had come at such a time. It was ridiculous, and you need to pull yourself together. Yuki turns Guy into a baffling sculpture, then sits and asks Guy to forgive him because he had a very sad day yesterday and now doubts everything. Guy asked why he was being disfigured again, and the young man smiled awkwardly and apologized again for upsetting Cecilia. The gargoyle replied he wasn't interested in human relationships and wouldn't accept his excuses. Yuki tells Tom he is not a good person and is about to leave. Guy began shouting that he had heard everything, no matter who said what. Yuki said he didn't know anything. Yuki asks Clayman for advice and goes to the Adventurers Guild, where Clayman says that's the way it is, and it's better to stay quiet and take a few hits. If the young man is patient, even paradise earned on his knees can wait for him. Yuki says asking Clayman for advice was not even worth thinking about. The man asks what he said wrong, to which the young man replied that it could only work for him and Sophia, and would not help him at all. A hand lands on the young man's shoulder. He turns to Raven to ask about his day off and then awkwardly asks Yuki what happened to him. The young man sees Raven as more a man of reason than of feeling. Raven says he wants to talk and asks if the young man has any free time. Raven also brings up Yuki's request to discuss something with him. Yuki says he'd like to ask the young man something if he doesn't mind. Raven brightens and says he can't promise to help, but he'll try hard because they're friends. The main character finds it very cute, and then says he moved to another place because it's crowded. After a while, they arrive at Yuki's room. Raven studies the gargoyle and asks the young man if he really got a new statue. After examining the statue, he says it is very good. Yuki was very surprised that someone liked his artwork. He was convinced he had made something incomprehensible. Raven looked at the young man staring at him and asked whether he had said something incomprehensible. Yuki said everything was fine, but inside he felt he still did not understand this strange world. The young man says he wanted to ask Raven for advice about love. He is surprised that Yuki wants to talk to him about it. He admits he lacks confidence and isn't sure whether Yuki should bring it up. Yuki suggested the young man at least try to listen. After Yuki's story, Raven summed up that he had upset a loved one by speaking at the wrong time and plans to behave properly at their next meeting. Surprised that Raven would be so worried about something like that, Yuki regards the young man as genuinely handsome, despite his sweet voice. Raven suddenly offers something as an apology, and Yuki realizes the pendant is from their last date, which turned into a real commotion, so they never managed to buy it. Yuki smiles and tells Raven this is a great idea. On their last date, they couldn't buy something. Raven's face went dark. Yuki asked what was wrong, and Raven said Yuki was already going on a date with his girlfriend, and their relationship was getting more serious. Beside him, Raven seems insignificant, and Yuki realizes their relationship with Happiness has not progressed at all. Yuki gets an idea and asks Raven to go shopping for gifts together. Raven asks if he really should go, and Yuki replies that he can make a gift for Happens. Hipponese rarely shows emotion, but the things she likes mean a lot to her. It also gives them an excuse to meet. Raven smiles, making it clear he likes the idea of buying gifts. Yuki asks why they are wasting time, then invites the young man to come along, and Raven agrees. After a while, they came to the accessory store, where Raven was in disguise and many couples were walking around. Raven whispered awkwardly to Yuki, asking why they were in such a hurry to decide since Raven also wanted to go home. And Yuki said he understood the young man, but it was too late to back down. Now that they've arrived, you should go pick the gifts. Raven agrees and carefully begins choosing jewelry. Yuki watched Raven, who was carefully considering a gift. Suddenly, a consultant approached and asked if she could help him with his search. Raven pulls out a piece of paper and writes that Uma needs a hair ornament. The girl asks about the ornament, and when Raven nods, she points the right way and asks him to come with her. Yuki notices that Raven carries a pen and paper, so she does not have to talk to people. Surprised, Raven says it's beautiful as he looks at a rose-shaped hairpin made of white feathers. Yuki thought Raven had finally decided to take the feather ornament. He picked up what he needed to be happy. Now it was his turn to pick a piece of jewelry. He looked at the pendant he and Cecilia couldn't buy last time and said he was glad it was still available. At last, they bought great gifts and left the store carrying beautiful rose-patterned bags. McCain suddenly called Raven from the side. She turned to the swordsman again and said she remembered they were on the same team. It also seemed a priest was with them. Grinning, she asks why two guys are suddenly in a store like that, and the other girl is already guessing when Yuki interrupts and asks what she's thinking. He said they were only there to pick out presents. The girl asked who the gifts were for. Yuki was about to say they were for his beloved Cecilia, but Raven stopped him and told him to be quiet. McCann giggles and says she always thought the swordsman's target was their priest, but she was mistaken. Raven felt awkward, compared to Yuga, who unwittingly drew crowds of girls to him because he couldn't ignore their friendliness. Raven avoided not just girls but everyone, serving as the swordsman of the heroes team. She looked at Raven, sighed, and said that as usual you won't get a word out of him. She later apologizes for laughing at the young man's voice the first time they were in the same group. Yuki looks at the girl and thinks she was laughing at Raven's voice too, and he realizes he remembers something like that, but she seems genuinely sorry. A strange sound caught their attention. Yuki tried to figure out what it was. Then he and Raven looked at the confused McCain. The girl asked them what they needed and whether they were really not hungry anymore. After saying there's nothing like that, Yuki will probably leave. McCain suddenly stops the young man and says she hasn't finished talking, so they go to a restaurant. Yuki protests and asks why the girl is deciding for them. Raven replies that it is useless. If McCain wanted something, so be it. After a while, they arrived at the restaurant. Yuki thought they had only gone out to buy a gift, and she wondered why it had turned out that way. She looked at the menu and remarked on the luxurious atmosphere here. The waiters are friendly and the food is top class. Raven leans over and whispers to Yuki, asking if the one he likes is Cecilia. Raven had guessed from Yuki's face when Makani asked about the gift. Yuki agrees and says it's her. Shaking, Raven says Yuki has angered Cecilia herself. Yuki whispered to Raven to stop because it wasn't the most important thing, and Raven had to figure out how they could get rid of Makanese's questions, so they could make a plan as the waitress approached Makona and asked what they would order. Yuki rips out the menu and tells the girl to bring them everything written on it. McCain tried to stop them and asked how much they were going to eat today. Yuki said they were hungry and that men needed to eat a lot. McCain said she did not care. I ordered a light cocktail for myself. Right then, the young men were hungrily eating the food they'd ordered. McCain said it seemed they were not going to talk to her. Yuki grinned, pleased that you couldn't chat while eating, and that was his and Raven's plan. Sighing, McCain said she wanted to talk with Cecilia about interesting stories. Yuki drained a glass of water and asked McCain to continue. The grand girl told the young man to listen to his stories first, asked how he was getting along with the priest Cecilia, and Yuki said he would not call it a promotion. According to Meekin, Cecilia is a priest in the heroes group who went on a date with a completely ordinary young man, and he says he has no promotion. Yuki explains there are several reasons for that. Makani adds that Yuga often did things that could anger the priest. Yuga entered the priest's room while the priest was changing, and in the communal bathroom they bumped into each other at a very inappropriate time. Yuki grew angry and asked where the hero was now. Using magic, he threatened to kill the hero. McCain stepped in and told him to calm down. The hero not only has many girls, but also gets to see Cecilia in many different ways. McCain said she was still speaking, so the young man should stay quiet. At that moment, Cecilia was still gently scolding him, and that was the worst part. Yuga unintentionally charmed the girls in every town and village where he stayed during his travels. No village or town could hold him for more than 3 days. Girls showed up at his hotel without being invited. Too kind to refuse them, the hero let them in, and despite McCann's warnings, he still made appointments with girls, which disrupted the trip. After a long delay in travel plans, the limit was reached and Cecilia turned to the hero. She called him careless with women. What followed was a lecture that lasted about 2 hours. Her constant kindness does not mean a priest cannot become angry. If that happens, it will be frightening. McCann then asks if the young man wants to hear about the swordsman now. Yuki is happy and says he's very sorry because Raven is still eating. He turns to Raven, who shows him a piece of paper that says he can't eat anymore. Yuki leans toward the young man and quietly asks if he is okay, while Raven says he can hardly eat because he fears McConaughey will talk about him and happyings, especially their awkward moments. He's just shy. The young man meets Raven's eyes, slams his fist on the table and says he'll protect Raven's innocent love. McCann gets angry and says the young man speaks as if she is being mean. Yuki replies that it is true, and the girl says she thought she could help them, but in the end could do nothing. Growing embarrassed, she says his relationship with Yuga hasn't been very warm lately, and she planned to tell them about it, hoping they would give her some advice. Yuki thought they were here for a consultation about life's problems. Yuki asks the girl exactly what is bothering her, even though that can distract McCann from Raven, and McCann says Yuga no longer talks to her like he used to. Unable to notice his indifference toward her, she knows exactly why. The girl faces the swordsman and says he knows about it too. Raven stiffens. Yuki felt the conversation growing heavier, and when Makani asked him to promise not to tell anyone, Yuki said he would not. Raven nods and McCain realizes she trusts him as well, so she will tell him. This information has not been officially published. They had been defeated many times in the Demon Lord's castle. Yuki is stunned and realizes he already knew. The girl says the Demon Lord was not to blame. A mid-level demon from the Demon Lord's castle caused it. Yuki asks if it's true, but thinks he already knows, since the guy is him too. The Khan says the demon was powerful. She has no idea where a demon like that came from in the Demon King's castle. Yuki is worried. The girl adds that they were completely defeated and ready to die, but before they knew it, they were in a nearby village. The demon even healed his battle wounds with care. Yuki was surprised and said the opponent was quite kind. McCann said it was deeply humiliating and showed the difference between them was so great that he took pity on them. Yuki says they finally managed to turn the Demon Lord. The girl agrees, and Yuki feels a very tense atmosphere. McCain agrees the young man is right, but when he hears what she says next, he will probably get angry with her because he loves Cecilia so much. The girl says the demon imposed conditions on them and would only have let them pass if they had left the priest there. McCain persuaded everyone else to accept these conditions. The young man was surprised when Raven told Yuki not to blame her, saying it was also his fault because he had no other way out. And he was even more shocked to learn his actions were causing Yuga and McCone's relationship to come apart at the seams. The young man required those conditions to confess to Cecilia and admits he feels guilty. Now he is an outsider who loves Cecilia and knows nothing. And Yuki asks whether they would really not have cared if she had died. McCain shouted absolutely not. This fight should never have been so risky. They once met the Demon King outside his castle, knew his power, and after studying everything they'd learned from earlier opponents, believed they could win. The people of Clarence thought victory was theirs, and then he appeared. No one expected the Demon King to have such a trump card, and Yuki knows he cannot tell them he was only a recluse. No one ever doubted victory, but they did not win and were defeated by unknown demons, so the girl could not talk about it. They had to keep people's trust in the heroes team and protect Yuga's good name, because if the team's failure became known, Yuga would be hit first. Losses piled up, and after a month, they had no excuses left. One day, someone told McCain there were strange heroes in their country. Determined to protect Yuga, Mikan was approached by a demon offering a proposal. A smile spread across her face because this was their chance. If they lose again, it will be the end of everything. A thought that has been nagging her but is really just an excuse because after everything they had been through, she was ready to leave Cecilia. Even if she could have been killed, her regret likely means she feels guilty. Yuki watched closely and then listened to what happened to Cecilia. When the Demon King fell, McCain wondered what was wrong with Cecilia, who immediately rushed to the girl's aid. Once the Demon King fell, Makani rushed back to Cecilia, ignoring her fatigue. When the girl saw Cecilia, she smiled warmly and praised McCain, realized Cecilia was unharmed, and Cecilia said she was very glad the girl was safe and sound. McCain couldn't rest and kept thinking about what Cecilia had said. According to her, the girl wasn't injured and then lost consciousness, which is how she fainted. Unable to speak to Cecilia, the girl could offer neither apology nor thanks. Her sole aim was to protect her lover, but now she owes Cecilia, and he seems to have moved away. Yuki asks the girl what she thinks after thinking it over and whether everything is okay now. McCain agrees and says it cannot go on like this, and the girl says she has to go and thanks them for listening to her. Yuki and Raven feel a little sad, then realize it's time for them to leave too. Later, the young man sits in his room and says, "The 2 weeks will finally end tomorrow." He had been eagerly awaiting this day and now looks in the mirror. Seeing his reflection, he feels pity. Yet the young man is unbeatable and will die in a scarlet flame. Today could be the worst day for anyone. Meanwhile, the main character appears very arrogant. Proud of his lively spirit and way with words, Yuki watched as Guy turned to him and asked what kind of circus the young man had put together here. Yuki turned around. His face went bright red and he screamed in horror, then ran out of the room, leaving Guy confused by the young man's behavior. Blushing, the young man covered his face and said the thought of meeting Cecilia tomorrow had completely carried him away, so he had completely forgotten about Guy and wondered when Guy even slept. He opened his eyes and saw Till carrying a bag on her back. She greeted the young man and said they had not seen each other for a long time. Agreeing with Till that they have not seen each other in a long time, the young man asks her what she needs, and the girl says a lady told him to come to the mansion tomorrow. Surprised, Yuki asked whether the girl had really come to thank her, then turned to Tilt and asked what was behind her back. She says they're books. He asks about them, and she agrees, while Yuki looks at her pleased face. The young man said he was going to leave, but asked if Phil could still come. Phil agreed, thanked him, and was very happy. Right now, the young man cannot go home and does not want to. After taking the money, he is hanging around on the streets. Noticing a bakery, the young man thinks it has very tasty cupcakes and goes in, assuming the saleswoman is a young girl. A huge, muscular man greeted the young man, and Yuki looked very surprised. He walked up and asked where the former saleswoman was. The man said his sister had been overworked, so her brother was filling in. The man places cupcakes in Yuki's bag and apologizes for handling them too roughly and slightly crushing them. The young man thanked him, looked at the crumbled cupcakes, tasted one, and said they were very good. A string of failures followed as he accidentally pushed a frightening man-beast, saw a couple laughing at a lonely young man, and nearly stepped into a disgusting mess on the ground. Yuki realizes today is clearly his day. Then he runs into a little boy who has dropped a skewer of kebabs. The main character bought another portion of kebabs and handed them to the young man. Meanwhile, he bought one extra. He told the boy to be careful in the future, and the boy thanked him. Yuki sighed. Just as he was about to say today had been a terrible day, he suddenly realized something had been stolen and saw a man running away. Shouting about his bad luck at running into a pickpocket, the young man chased him. The young man ran into an alley and shouted that the pickpocket would not leave. He kicked one pickpocket, who collided head-on with a second, and Yuki was surprised when another appeared. The young man said it was fine, but finding the wallet was more important now. Suddenly, someone called out to him. Turning his head, he saw Yugi pointing his sword at him. The young man ordered Yuki to give back the stolen purse. Yuki said it was his wallet. Since Yuki had just been robbed, Yuga understood and said he did not want to return the purse. If that's the case, he'll take it by force. The young man swings his sword, but Yuki deftly dodges and asks Yugi to listen to them. Soon, Yuga was in the custody of the city guards. Yuki realized this was his worst day. The guards faced Yuki and told him he had to explain everything at headquarters. The main character realized this was the worst day in the world. Yuki sat in the city guard room with handcuffs on and told the guard he had already said several times that he only returned the stolen purse. The male guard asked if the young man was really breaking for the first time, and then ordered him not to be stubborn and to tell everything. Yuki frowned and said he wasn't lying but was just thinking about what to do now. Yuga, the hero, says only what he wants, so others immediately see him as a villain. Yuki closes his eyes and thinks the situation is very bad. Raven suddenly stepped into the room. The guard shuddered and turned to Commander Raven. Yuki was stunned to see Raven, and the young man carefully studied the whole situation. Raven held up a note, and the guard read that the young man was asking what had happened. Yuki sat silently beside him while the swordsman wrote, telling the guard to listen carefully. A short time later, the male guard saluted and wished Raven and the young man a good day, then removed Yuki's handcuffs, and Yuki waved his hands, relieved that he had suffered enough for the day. During a fair hearing, Raven proved Yuki was not at fault. Later, Yuga repented and apologized to the young man. Sighing, Yuki said he only escaped because Raven told him not to apologize for anything. Through the window, he watched Yuki being led to the police station. Raven told Yuki he will firmly scold Yuga and that he is very sorry, and Yuki agreed, saying it had been very unpleasant. The young man then asks Raven if he is talking to Yuga, but the young man says he is just using a pen and paper. Yuki told Raven he would not convince many people that way. Raven replied that he was coping and described an odd incident at a party when the door opened and Duke stood there calling him. She said she had heard the captain was being held captive by the Order of Knights and was about to ask where he was. Suddenly she noticed Yuki standing beside Raven, who squinted toward the main character. Duke glared at the captain and accused him of breaking the law by acting without Cecilia's supervision, and Yuki shouted that he had not. Duke said she understood and added that the only thing she couldn't understand was how the young man had let himself get robbed. Yuki felt embarrassed and told them not to say anything. Raven was sitting at the table writing on paper. He said he'd overlooked it today and apologizes to the young man. Then he finishes writing and says he wrote through a mark, so they can go to Yuga now. Yuki thought the stack of paper in Raven's hands was very large. Duke told Raven she had said it didn't matter whether he was a hero or not, and Raven asked Duke to stop because she was already looming so much. After Raven left the room, Yuki folded his arms and asked Duke for a minute, saying Raven had hinted Duke was looming, and the girl shuddered and insisted this was not true. Yuki said Raven is not an ordinary person, but Commander Duke, and the girl said she obeys only the young man because he is the captain and calls him commander in public. Someone knocked at the door and asked for forgiveness. Both of them looked toward her. An elf-like girl walked into the room. Her name was Elena. Turning to Duke, she admitted she had snuck out of training again. Yuki watched her with disdain. Elena took Duke's hand and ordered her to follow, and Yuki noticed the girl's pointed ears and realized she was actually an elf. Yuki didn't know there were elf knights. He also thought the Duke shouldn't burden others, and finally he says it's time for him to go too. A while later, he meets the hero Yuga. The young man was glad Yuki had finally left the building. The main character looked at hero Yuga with disdain. Yuki turns to leave, but Yuga grabs his shoulder and says he was waiting for him. Yuga realizes they had already met because the young man had been with Cecilia at the time. Yuki agrees. He says it was so dark in that alley he didn't recognize him. He asks Yuki to accept his deepest apologies for the situation. Then the young man asks if Yuki is offended, and Yuga himself exuded a heroic aura. Yuki closed his eyes as Yuga glowed intensely, feeling too close to the night unit and unwilling to bring Raven any more trouble, so he said everything was fine. The hero asked whether that was really true. A good restaurant was nearby. He invited the young man to come along. Yuki agreed and followed him right away. A young man shouted that the hero was too loud and should be more modest. Hugo said he did not want to be loud. They arrived at the restaurant after a while. Yuki recognized it as the same place he'd been to with Makani and Ravenback. Hugo said it was spacious and the staff clearly loved their work. Yuki remembered Makani saying the food and service here were excellent, and he thought about how much he already knew thanks to Makana. The young man looked over the menu and said everything looked very interesting. Hugo agreed. The waitress came over. Yuki ordered a drink from the menu. The girl was surprised he did not want anything else. The main character agreed, figuring he had eaten so much last time that he was already tired of the food here. Hugo broke off his thoughts and said he wanted to apologize again for what happened earlier. He admits he acted very recklessly, and that caused it. Yuki said everything was fine, but honestly he did not care. Pugo said that, as a fellow hero, the young man did not understand how he could act so carelessly with an innocent man. Yuki felt he was being too harsh on the hero, but said it was okay, and Hugo breathed a sigh of relief, jumped up and told the young man to get straight to the point. He asked what was happening between Yuki and Cecilia. After a short pause, Yuki said he and Cecilia were just friends. Shocked, Hugo said it was very bad because Cecilia was friends with the boy. Hugo asks again if there is really nothing between Yuki and Cecilia, and Yuki says Hugo can ask Raven since they are friends too, because there is nothing between them, and Yuki does not understand why Hugo is so surprised. Hugo is surprised the young man also happens to be friends with Raven. Yuki agrees. Taken aback, the hero fell silent and began thinking about his friends, talking to himself while Yuki looked at him in disbelief. Hugo sat at the table, grew very serious, and asked permission to seek the young man's advice. Yuki can't see why he should be the one giving this advice. Hugo cringes and admits he has no friends. Shocked, Yuki says it is terrible and he shouldn't have found out about Hugo's pathetic secret. The hero presses on and asks what he should do to get closer to Cecilia. Yuki realizes this is already very bad and tenses up. Although the main character told Hugo he and Cecilia are just friends, he still has feelings for her and will not help his rival. Yuki apologizes and says he recently met a girl. Compared to the other guys, he is a stranger to her. Hugo should be closer to the girl than Yuki, so he should ask a teammate. Hugo says Raven probably won't help him because he scolded him recently. The young man shows a huge stack of papers and says it's the first time he's seen Raven write so much. Yuki thinks there really are a lot of papers. The hero says McCaney isn't an option because she doesn't care about Cecilia, and Yuki is surprised by the young man's words and doesn't understand why Hugo thinks that. Yuki asks about McKenna and describes what kind of person she is. Hugo wonders whether the main character really knows her too, and he says McKenna has been his girlfriend since childhood and has helped the hero ever since. Since she had asked Cecilia once, he could never forgive her. He asks Yuki whether McCann is very cruel. He can't understand how she could do this to her friend. Yuki got angry and asked Yuki to slow down. Hugo was surprised when the young man suddenly grew serious. Yuki said she persuaded that demon to accept the deal, and he wondered whether anyone had considered why she did it, saying Hugo may not truly believe Mikane must bear the burden alone and questioning how he could know everything. The protagonist said Raven and McCain had recently told him. It turns out the girl had been blaming herself all along for what had happened. Yuki grows angry and asks Hugo if he knows that McCain really cried for days and nights. Surprised, Hugo asked why she felt that way, since McCanny was the one who abandoned Cecilia. Because she was the only one to accept the demon's terms, everyone thinks she's terrible. Yuki screamed and ordered Hugo to stop saying whatever he wanted. Even Raven felt guilty. It was unclear whether the hero himself had ever felt responsible. Hugo shouted that everything was wrong and that Yuki was mistaken. He was wrong because the hero isn't that kind of person. Yuki told him to calm down and answer his question again, asking whether the young man really did not look like the angel he appeared to be. Surprised, Hugo felt tears welling in his eyes. Yuki realized things were falling apart. Hugo said he was the worst. Hugo pinned everything on Makini and denied any involvement. He couldn't defeat that demon. Yuki noticed Hugo was already in tears. This guy is just a kid. Yuki should have watched her mouth. She turned to the hero and told him to listen, saying it was the first time he had experienced failure and asking if he would give up now. He must understand he cannot be happy if he keeps denying his share of responsibility. Yuki realized he had made the hero cry, but he hoped nothing would happen to him. Huko said that when McCann learned he wanted to be a hero, she began studying magic diligently. She scolded him whenever he acted rashly. Since childhood, he has caused trouble for everyone and does not know what to do. Yuki said that if Hugo acted like this, it was no wonder he kept getting scolded. Hugo was very surprised. The young man explains that Makone is acting that way because she cares about the hero, then asks if he understands this. Delighted, Hugo said he would go at once to ask her forgiveness and then hear all her complaints. Yuki assured him he would succeed, and Hugo took the young man's hand and said he still counted on him, so he would not go to Mikana alone. Yuki was very surprised. A short time later, Hugo and Yuki reached Mokna's house. Yuki was out of breath. I then asked Hugo if he was doing it on purpose. Hugo asked where the young man was going so fast. Apologizing, Hugo said he wouldn't have had the courage to go alone, then asked Yuki to wait outside. Yuki agreed, and Hugo was happy and thanked the young man. Realizing he nearly forgot to introduce himself, the hero learns the young man is named Hugo, who says he is pleased to meet you, and he thanks him for pointing out the mistake. The main character gives his name, says he's happy to meet you, thinks Hugo has softened his request, and when Hugo tries to suggest something for Yuki to do next time, he pushes Hugo and tells him to go. Yuki caused the conflict between Hugo and Makane, but then helped them make up, and he thinks cheering up is worth doing more often. Yuki realized the young man hadn't knocked, and a moment later, hero Hugo opened Makane's door while the girl was changing clothes. Makane noticed Yuki had come into her house. Embarrassed, she screamed when Yuki appeared in the doorway. It shocked Makane that Hugo had suddenly come to her house and found her at that moment. Yuki realizes he should not have forgotten that Hugo is just a lucky guy. At that moment, the hero shouted at McConaughey to be quiet and listen. The girl asked him to wait because the situation felt very awkward. Hugo said he understood everything and admitted he had been too cruel to her. Yuki said Hugo was incorrigible. Hugo kept telling Makana she was always at his side, supporting and helping him with everything. He behaved like a total egotist and then asked the girl for forgiveness. Embarrassed, McCain said Yugi's name. The young man said he knew simple apologies would not fix anything. To make her feel a little better, she had to do something. Hugo said the girl should scold him. Yuki and McCain were stunned. Then McCain got angry, grinned and laughed, and said the young man had burst in without warning while she was changing clothes and was now asking her to scold him. Grinning, she asked whether the young man really liked to endure pain, and Hugo looked surprised and asked what she meant, adding that he only wanted to make amends. Grabbing the magic staff, the girl said she would not even ask permission to scold the young man, and then swung and hit him. Turning away, Yuki decided to go home while the two continued fighting behind him. Once the anger subsides, they may finally reconcile. Later, the young man comes home and opens the door to find Till and Gaia there. A girl hugs the statue and tells the gargoyle he looks very cool in that form, and Gaia asks her not to lean so close. After Yuki closed the door, he realized he had completely forgotten Till had been here the whole time. Till wiped the statue and apologized, and Guy asked her not to bother because the girl hadn't fully recovered yet. Till sniffed, lowered her head, and agreed with the gargoyle. Guy then told the girl that if he didn't stay with him, he could go to her. The girl was delighted. Yuki took a breath and smiled, then thought we needed to walk a little more so we wouldn't distract Till and Guy. Yuki cracked his eyes open and saw Cecilia calling his name, sitting on the bed beside him. The young man was surprised. The girl tucked her hair behind her ear and told the young man she missed him so much that she ran here as fast as she could. Yuki blushed all over and sweat formed on his cheeks. He jumped up and screamed. then saw Guy's stone-like face beside him. Yuki asked what he was doing near him. Guy said the young man had finally woken, and that was a great loss because the dream had been so wonderful. Embarrassed, Yuki blamed Guy and asked why Guy had sent him that dream. Guy became violent. The Gargoyle said it was because the young man had helped Guy, so the Gargoyle wanted to show his gratitude. Yuki remembered how Guy had spent time with Till, so he understood what the demon meant when he said thanks. Guy broke into a smile, said that she really liked his new look, and used his powers a little for Yuki. Yuki said sleep couldn't be called gratitude. Guy said he didn't know what kind of dream it was, but he was sure it wasn't a nightmare. The dream reflected the young man's deepest desires. Yuki covered his face with his hands and blushed, and Guy couldn't understand why he was acting that way, and the Gargoyle said he only wanted to repay the young man, but nothing had gone according to plan. The main character blushed and hesitated about what to say, wanting to see Cecilia but now feeling too embarrassed. The young man said it didn't matter. Taking the jewelry box meant for Cecilia, she looked in the mirror. Standing in a heroic pose, the young man told his reflection to listen carefully and said he would remember this day for the rest of his life. Many people slammed their doors and set off. As he walked the city streets, the young man saw no other residents and felt he had stepped out a little early. Spotting a bakery, he thinks he should go buy those wonderful cupcakes. Someone calls to him from the side. A friendly girl said she was giving away free cupcakes. Since he has already been to their bakery, he can have one if he wants. Surprised, the young man reached for a bag of cupcakes as the girl said her brother was very sorry for crushing them and that their bakery was giving them away free today, which he understood. Then he turns to the girl and her brother and thanks them for the cupcakes. Standing in a heroic pose, the man made Yuki think he was still the same. A beast man catches his eye, and the man turns to the young man to apologize for staring last time, admitting he had been overly cautious before and now sees the young man is very capable. Yuki said it was nice to meet him, and the man said he knows Clayman and invited the young man to visit his guild when he has time. Yuki realized the man had not acted that way on purpose. The man's unfriendly appearance had made the young man assume the man saw him as a demon. The young man spots several people who look like guards, and a man with a little boy. Bowing to Yuki, the man said their young master had caused trouble for the young man yesterday, and offered the young man Mr. Butler's deepest apologies. The young man looks at the boy. The young master admits he played too much yesterday and lost sight of him, asks Yuki to accept this small compensation, and Yuki takes the package and thanks him. They bowed and left. Yuki wondered what was in the package. The young man was from a wealthy family, so the package might hold something valuable. Opening the bag, the young man sees a huge number of skewers piled with fried meat. Yuki arrives at the manor to visit Cecilia. He thinks today is a very good day and no one is giving him a pass. Happiness greets him, calls him captain, and points out which way he should go. Yuki, smiling, says she should not accompany him because he knows this place very well. The girl asks the young man to follow her. Because this is her job, the young man should not refuse. Yuki must agree. Yuki wonders why the girl is so serious. Happings leads Yuki down the hallway, and he trembles because he's finally going to see Cecilia. The young man is about to open the door but becomes nervous. Happiness calls him shy, and Yuki shouts, asking who the girl is referring to. Happiness asks what the young man is talking about. Yuki wonders why the girl treats him that way. Happiness hides his reaction. Yuki shouts that there's definitely nothing wrong with his hearing. Happens asks if Yuki has truly calmed down. Surprised, Yuki apologizes to Happens. Her help now lets him control himself. He believes happiness is really that good. The protagonist smiled and decided it was time to go in. Yuki enters Cecilia's room looking delighted, and Cecilia, reading a book, sees him and says they haven't seen each other in a long time. Scratching his head, the young man says it feels like 6 months have gone by. The girl giggles and says it's actually only been half a month. He is still funny. The young man changes the subject and says he brought her some food, and she looks in the bags and says they contain cupcakes and fried meats. The girl is surprised and says the young man's gift is quite odd. Yuki laughs and says he actually got it all for free. Cecilia smiles and says Yuki already seems used to life in Minerva and this world. She recalls the day the main character was in the Demon Lord's castle. He said he wanted to die. Smiling, the girl asks the young man how he feels about his real life now. Yuki started talking. He said he was happier than ever right now. Having someone to live for may be the reason. Above all, he wants to spend this life with Cecilia because she is the reason it exists. The girl said it sounded really cool and, like Yuki, wants to find meaning in life. Yuki says it's not that difficult. Cecilia giggles and tells him he doesn't need to be modest. She says it's been a long time since they last met, so she suggests they have cupcakes together and will make them tea now. Yuki agrees and then asks if this isn't a maid's job. Cecilia said Sophia taught her a lot, and her cooking skills have reached a new level. Yuki now wants to try it. After a while, Cecilia made tea, and the young man sat with the girl at the table, drinking it and feeling very relaxed. The young man said the tea was delicious, and he was simply happy. The girl said the cupcakes were fine too. For some reason, Yuki felt he had forgotten something. The young man felt the gift box for Cecilia in his pants pocket and remembered he was here to give her this pendant. The young man stayed at the table with Cecilia, watching her eat cupcakes, close her eyes in pleasure, and say how delicious they were. Keeping his hand on the box in his pocket, he realized this was his only chance. A sudden feeling made him stand up abruptly. Cecilia asked Yuki what happened. Yuki went to the window and said he just wanted to air the room. At the window, he noticed something. He spotted Hugo and McCain right outside Cecilia's house. Yuki wondered whether someone was eavesdropping on them. The young man used sensory enhancement. Hugo, overjoyed, told Nakana to look because they had arrived at Cecilia's mansion and suggested she go greet the girl. McCain asks you to stop, then asks if the young man remembers why they came here. Hugo said he obviously remembers it. They'd made the mistake of leaving behind a comrade as valuable as Cecilia. They are here so she can scold them. McCain called the young man stupid and said everything was wrong. She hit him on the forehead. Hugo told Makona that it was too painful. He wondered whether the girl had really done it out of concern for him, and he thanked her. McCain was confused and wondered who had put these strange thoughts into the young man's head. Yuki realized he caused it, and now knows for sure that Hugo truly enjoys pain. Then you turn to Makana and ask if she will go. Makana asks if the young man remembers that they owe her an apology. After thinking, Yuki realizes things are very bad because Hugo and McCanny are coming here and could cause him a lot of trouble. He wants to be alone with Cecilia. The young man asks Cecilia to help him with something. Cecilia does not understand what he wants from her. After a short while, the young man takes the girl's hand and runs down the corridor with her. The girl asks if Yuki can tell her where they are going. He apologizes to Cecilia, admitting it may look like he went a bit overboard. There must be a place in this house where no one will find them. And the young man asks Cecilia to wait here for a while. He pressed his back against the wall and considered his next move. Duke asked Raven how long he planned to sit there doing nothing. She looked at Raven with disdain as he trembled and asked him to hurry and give her the gift he was holding. Yuki realized Raven wanted to give Happiness a gift. The young man worried that Happiness might dislike the gift and thought it was too harsh, fearing that if she refused him, he would not know how to go on. But the Duke reminded him he was a knight and needed to calm down. She reminds him he even took time off for this and should stop acting pathetic. The young man said she was right and that he would just do it. At the door, he suddenly froze and began to shake. Duke shouted for him to hurry because if he lingered, Happion's lunch break would end soon. The young man apologized to Duke. Yuki silently wished him luck. Yuki decided worrying about Raven now would let his situation spiral out of control. Cecilia said she was waiting here for the young man, just as he had said. The young man took her hand and led her after you. She screamed, asking where he was taking her this time. The young man then led Cecily to the courtyard. Till stood there, talking with Sheik and asking him to listen to her. She said she went to see the Gargoyle yesterday and that he looked really cool. Then she turned away from what she had said and added that he was always like that. But yesterday, he seemed even better. The girl asked Sheik whether he had been listening, and the young man grinned and said he had actually been asleep. Thiole said it was too early, but she still had to tell him. Yuki noticed Tilla was raving about the Gargoyle again. He told Cecilia the place wasn't right for them either, and they should move on. They spotted Sophia and Celia. Celia asked the girl if her daughter was all right. Yuki watched them closely. Cecilia stepped up to the young man and whispered that it was ugly for Eve to fall like that. The young man said he was just curious. He thinks about Clayman and Sophia already having a baby. Sophia told Celia it was hard for them right now, but she still didn't want her daughter to be like her father. Celia asked if that was it. Sophia's husband is quite an interesting man. The girl said it would still be a problem if she tried to change his character. And then Sophia appeared in the doorway and turned to Yuki to ask if he was all right. Frightened, the young man grabbed Cecilia and shouted that they had been discovered. They ran on, and Cecilia told Yuki she had already told him. After a while, they came to the library. Catching her breath, Cecilia turned to Yuki and asked him to tell her exactly what he was looking for in the house. Yuki felt there was nowhere in the house to be alone, so she apologized and said the girl was probably very tired because of her. He takes out a box containing a pendant and hands it to Cecilia. The girl is very embarrassed. She asks if Yuki really wants to give her this jewelry, and a young man wonders if the girl remembers when she couldn't buy this pendant in that store. For that reason, he bought the pendant as a gift, and this time he says he's more serious than ever. Pausing, she smiled and thanked Yuki sincerely, and the young man blushed as she said she would cherish his gift. Suddenly, the library door swings open, and Yuki and Cecilia turn toward the doorway. Yuga stood there, turned to Cecilia, and said he had finally found her. McCain and Hipponese stood beside him. He spots Yuki and asks why the two of them are here alone and what it means. Meekin suddenly covers Yuga's mouth and says Yuki and Cecilia look very cute together and maybe she should reconsider her views. Raven and Duke walked up to them. The girl told the captain he was doing well. At one point, Sophia turned to everyone, greeted them as dear guests, apologized for interrupting, and invited them to the courtyard. They all looked at her and agreed. Soon, Cecilia and the others stood in the courtyard eating meat on skewers. Cecilia told Yuki it was great he had brought so many grilled meats. Yuki agreed. Hugo called Cecilia and asked to call the girlfriend who was there. The girl agreed, and Yuki stepped aside. He said he knew he'd made a big mistake. Arguing that the girl should scold him, he was cut off when McCann hit him on the head. She dusted her hands, exhaled, and the girl turned to Cecilia. McCain knelt immediately and apologized to Cecilia for telling her the truth, leaving Cecilia very surprised. Smiling, she said it was fine if McCain was referring to that incident. McCain nearly cried and said the girl was her friend. Cecilia sits down beside Makona and asks if the girl remembers they had no choice. The girl looks up and sees she is still with all of them. Cecilia holds out her hand to the girl and says she no longer has to be tortured, and Mecania rejoices and thanks Cecilia for forgiving her. Yuki watches the girls, thinking things will finally be the same. Someone tugs at his clothes, and he turns around. Ichi stood behind them holding a beautiful feather ornament, and Yuki asked the girl what happened and whether the jewelry in her hands was really a hair clip, and the girl said it was her gift. Yuki realized the jewelry was a gift from Raven, noted that Happing rarely gets gifts, and suggested Happing try it on. Happing agreed and put on a hair ornament. She then notices them, and he tells Happine this hairpin is very cute. Yuki tells Happines the jewelry suits her very well. Happines feels embarrassed and thanks Yuki for the compliment. Yuki thinks Happiness looks very happy, and that Raven did a great job. Having just seen him so drooping, he thought it was probably because he wasn't answering him, and Duke was cheering him on. Curious, Yuki decided to watch from the sidelines. Suddenly, someone called to him. Yuki turns and asks Cecilia if they're done. Cecilia agrees, thanks the young man, and says it was thanks to Macone and Hugo that they were able to reconcile. The young man says he felt a little guilty, so he wanted to do something to help them. Cecilia finds it very sweet. Somehow, ever since she met Yuki, a white streak has appeared in her life. She hopes he'll keep taking care of her, and Yuki says he hopes so too because he oddly feels they've been dating a long time, and if it keeps going like this, it will be great. The next day, the main character returns to the Adventurers Guild, taps Clayman's chair, and asks when he'll be promoted to A rank. At that moment, the man was going through some papers and asked why he suddenly had to promote him. Yuki says he was given only B rank missions the whole time. Clayman asks what the young man means. At only 6 months in the guild, B rank is still impressive. Yuki says he wants to move on as soon as he can. Clayman scratched his head and told the young man not to even think about it. A promotion to a rank will increase the number of difficult tasks, leaving him even more at Yuki's mercy. The man gets angry and says it means he'll have to work even harder, and Yuki says that now it's clear why he keeps beating around the bush, because he's just really lazy. Back from the Adventurers Guild, Yuki says aloud he is very bored and wants a tougher challenge as soon as possible. Clayman refused him in the end. If someone who joined the guild only 6 months ago gets that rank, it will certainly upset the other members. Clayman may still be watching him. It's most likely because of the trouble he'll get from the young man. The main character felt upset when he realized this. After a while, the young man came home and said he was home. Yuki added that when no one is home, Guy just sleeps peacefully. The Gargoyle said Yuki came home early today. Yuki says you can say that what he wanted to do has already been resolved because he felt the negotiations had failed. Then Guy says he has something to tell the young man. Then he revealed his true form, and Yuki asked what had happened and why Guy had suddenly done it. The Gargoyle revealed its true form. His body started to crack. Yuki felt scared and asked what it was. Yuki noticed the many large cracks along the Gargoyle's body. Guy said the damage from the last battle was too severe. His body can no longer return to its original state. Yuki asked Guy why he was bringing it up only now. Guy said that telling him earlier would not have changed anything. Yuki says there has to be a treatment. Tio will definitely find a way to help the Gargoyle. Guy says life and death are not for them to decide. He had little time left. His body will collapse completely in 5 days. He wants Yuki to take care of Till because she is like him and not yet fully recovered. Yuki asks whether it is real. The Gargoyle said she's gotten worse lately. He's watched the girls since childhood, so he spots any change right away. Yuki agrees and says he will take over for Till. Guy apologizes to the young man for bothering him and says that's all he wanted to say. Yuki objects and says he has one thing to add but hesitates. Striking a cool pose, Yuki says he must help Guy too because he has already decided everything. Guy asks whether the young man might have hit his head, then says his time is running out so everything feels pointless. And Yuki asks how Guy can know he'll succeed if they don't even try. The young man asks Sky to rely on him. The house would be too boring without him. He has always been a great piece of art here. Guy says he has little hope and can only sit and wait. He says he trusts a young man with Teal. Yuki thinks that man will worry about Teal to the very end, even if his life is in danger. Yuki says asking the Duke is the best option for demonic items, but he's now trying to figure out where to look for her. After a while, the young man arrives at the knight's headquarters where Duke and Irina are already waiting. And when Yuki enters, Duke is surprised the captain has come. Gasping, Yuki said he had finally found a girl. Duke asked what the captain needed and told him to wait while she sorted some paperwork. Yuki agreed and went to the sofa. Flopping onto the sofa, he said he was exhausted and wished he could fly, but that would make Cecilia angry. Resting, the main character was suddenly approached by Irene. After introducing herself, she said she had noticed that the young man and the Duke always helped each other, so she wanted to find out what was between them. The young man passed away, saying his name was Yuki. The thought crossed his mind that the girl seemed easily fooled. He said he and Duke used to have a boss-subordinate relationship, that Yuki had been Duke's captain, and Irina was surprised, calling Yuki a truly wonderful person. When Irina asked what kind of captain the young man was, Yuki said it was top secret, and warned that if he told her she would have to say goodbye to her life, which terrified Irina. The Duke suddenly approached them and asked the captain what he had said to Irina here. The young man apologized and said he was only curious about her reaction. Duke said she didn't know what the young man had told Irene and that it wasn't true. The girl asked if that was so. Duke replied that captain was just a nickname for the young man. Irina tells him she and the captain need to speak privately, then says she will leave and bows. Yuki pointed out that because this involves demons, Duke must be fully aware, so we asked him. Duke listened and said the Gargoyle's body was slowly collapsing. Duke said magic minerals could solve the problem. Everything seemed very simple. Yuki was surprised it really was that simple. He had thought it could not be that simple. Duke said the man probably should have known about this, and Yuki replied that he had only been sleeping in the temple, so it's logical he doesn't know this. Duke asked what would be best for the young man. As a member of the demonic race, he shouldn't be asking such questions. Yuki apologized to Duke and said he was simply too lazy. Thanks to Duke, he found a way to save the Gargoyle's life. Grateful, he thanked Duke, who said it was no problem and was happy to help. Now the young man is figuring out where to find the magic minerals and what they look like. He's already thinking about going back to ask Duke about it, when someone suddenly shouts at him from the side. Turning, he sees Cecilia running toward him. Breathless, Cecilia tells Yuki that Till is in very bad shape, and Yuki, scared, asks if it's true. The priest said Till fainted while cleaning. Sheik is with her now and looking after her, but the girl asked that he be called here. Yuki thinks the gargoyle and the other began feeling sick at the same time and might be linked, and Cecilia asks if anything could have happened to him. Yuki told Cecilia everything, and she was surprised to learn the gargoyle had only 5 days left. He said he had a way to help. They needed magic minerals, and Cecilia asked whether that was true. Yuki said they had to take care of it until now anyway. After a while, they arrive at Till's house. Feeling very ill, the girl greets the captain, and Yuki asks how she is feeling. At that moment, Sheikh was organizing the medicines and getting them ready for the girl. He said he would do his best, but he didn't have enough medicine. Yuki said he understood and would go look for something else. Sheikh said that was the captain's duty, and he was counting on the young man. Sheikh said this was only temporary, so he could not leave the girl alone, and his eyes were very tired. Cecilia asked whether Sheikh was truly worried about Tilly as well. The young man replied that he was, since he also felt responsible for the girl's condition. The main character told everyone to count on him because he would bring medicine. Cecilia objected to the young man and said she would handle it herself. Yuki asked Cecilia what she meant, and Cecilia said he had really forgotten to take care of the gargoyle, so Sheikh handed him a list of the herbs he needed, and Yuki insisted he hadn't forgotten, but noted the list included many herbs. Sheikh asked what Cecilia and Yuki were talking about, and what was wrong with the gargoyle, and Yuki decided to tell me what was happening. Then Till's voice was heard, and the girl asked whether Yuki was really telling the truth. Sheikh says the girl can't get up because she needs to rest. Till says she'll be okay, and they must hurry to save the gargoyle. Tears well in her eyes, but she keeps asking the boys for help. Taking the girl's hand, she tells her not to worry, and assures her Yuki will find a way to save the gargoyle. Cecilia kept smiling, giving off warmth and light. Teal asked whether it was real, then said it was wonderful. She added that a girl shouldn't forget herself, and that Sheikh, Yuki, and she will take care of Till, so you don't have to worry and can rest right now. After Cecilia uses magic, Teal falls asleep, and Cecilia tells Yuki that her job is to heal people and restore their health. That is why the young man should leave this matter to her. She smiled sweetly at him. Yuki agrees, and Sheikh asks them to let him help until 2. Yuki says he will go look for magic minerals. Cecilia tells me she will collect medicinal herbs for Till. The young man asks Cecilia and Sheik to do their best for Till and Guy. After some time, the main character arrives at the merchant guild where a clerk apologizes and says the magic minerals are not available yet. Yuki was surprised and asked whether they really did not exist at all, and the man confirmed it. Yuki felt upset because he had carefully checked before coming and was sure the item he needed would be sold here. Clayman suddenly appears beside the young man. The employee greets him, apologizes for the wait, and says the mission details he asked for are ready. A man hands Clayman a note. People were thrilled to see him, and some wondered whether he was really that popular. He turned to the man and asked if he had understood that this mission was harder than the last. The man agreed and said the reward had also increased. Clayman looked at the young man and greeted him, saying the young man had arrived just in time. Yuki said the young man was refusing, and Clayman added that the young man had not said anything yet. Yuki says he wants the young man to complete the task, but now isn't the right time, because he needs to find magical minerals. Clayman asks about the magic minerals and says he is very lucky in this case. They can be obtained by completing this mission. Clayman said that if the young man helped him, he would share it with him. The young man asks whether that is true. Clayman asks which rank the young man wants to be promoted to, and with his authority he can put in a good word for him. Yuki wonders whether this claim is really the source of all the trouble. It's hard to believe, but it doesn't matter now. The claimant said if the young man urgently needed the minerals, they could move out tomorrow morning, and Yuki says that's very good because he will do anything for a magic miner. The man says they reached an agreement. The merchant asked if they were actually taking on the task. Clayman agrees and says he will do everything he can not to let the man down. Yuki thinks Clayman thinks too highly of himself. Yuki asks the man to fill him in on the details. Clayman says they need to collect magic minerals and are leaving tomorrow morning, so they should meet in front of the guild at dawn. Clayman says goodbye to the young man, and Yuki doesn't understand why the man was so vague about the case details. Yuki figured he had no choice, Cecilia and Sheik are doing their best, so he should give it his all too. The next morning, Yuki meets Cecilia. Finding her by the carriage surprises him. A girl greets a young man who returns the greeting and asks what she is doing here. Cecilia said she wasn't alone, pointed to Sophia in the carriage, and Clayman was there too. Yuki and Cecilia climbed into the carriage, and the young man asked what it all meant. Cecilia explained she had visited herb shops, but none had what he needed. Those herbs grow only where magic is strong, so she asked Sophia to go with her and help. Sophia said the mansion's mistress was in trouble, and as head maid she could not just stay away. Yuki thinks it's very cool. Sophia added that her husband also needed to go there on assignment, so she decided to go with him. Yuki says he understands, which means they share the same destination now, and then asks if he can ask a question, points to a claim, and wants to know what happened to him. With an indifferent expression, Sophia says Clayman objected to her but tells Yuki and Cecilia not to worry because she has already handled everything her way. And Clayman blinks and gets up from her lap. Clayman says he only sleeps that sweetly on Sophia's lap. Yuki asked whether Clayman had really regained consciousness. He's talking nonsense. Cecilia said Clayman's healing ability was incredible, and Clayman grinned said Sophia's healing magic was the best for him. Yuki says he knows the man has just come to his senses, but you can tell him about the assignment so he knows what's going on. The man says they will need to destroy the monsters that live in the magical mineral mines. He'd heard they weren't stronger than the C rank, but they weren't completely sure. Yuki thinks there's nothing wrong so far. Concerned about timing, the main character asks if they'll arrive there on time. Yuki thinks that if things go wrong, he'll just fly to the Gargoyle with the magic minerals. Clayman suggests they hold off reporting to the guild for now. Cecilia asks why now. Clayman says it will let them enjoy the trip fully. Suddenly, Sophia hit him and told her husband to watch his tongue. He said he understood the girl's request. Yuki and Cecilia thought it was cruel. After a while, they reach their lodgings. Sophia looks at the hotel and says they will spend the night there and finally reach the mines tomorrow morning. Cecilia agrees with her. Yuki realizes he has never seen Sophia agree to be a maid and wonders what she will wear to fight. The next morning, Sophia tells Yuki and Cecilia the hour has come. The young man is surprised and points out she is still in her maid uniform, and Cecilia doubts whether it is appropriate to fight in that outfit. Sophia says this outfit is for solo combat, so they don't have to worry. Her husband said he likes seeing her like this. The girl was embarrassed. Clayman approached them, asked what was wrong, and told them they had to move on. They arrive at a cave. Cecilia uses light magic to illuminate the path for everyone. Yuki says he heard a rumor that a man loves maids. The man was surprised and asked why the young man had asked that so suddenly. Yuki said Clayman had earlier said he liked it. The man understood what the young man meant and said seeing Sophia in that outfit makes him feel calmer, because it suggests she is doing a simple job. Surprised, Yuki says he understood what the man meant. Clayman adds that the young man should not think he is forcing her. Yuki admits he is jealous of their love, and Clayman asks what the young man means. Yuki changes the subject and asks whether Clayman and Sophia really have a child. The man confirms they do, and says they have a son and a daughter. Their son looks like his mother, and their daughter looks like her father. Sophia turns to them and says, maybe they should stop their idle chatter because the monsters arrived long ago. Yuki is about to tell everyone the monsters are already here when Sophia appears. Sophia swings her foot and destroys all the monsters. Yuki stands stunned and watches. Sophia instantly knocks the monster to the ground. Clayman says Sophia may be a maid now, but she is still strong. He knows the young man wants to protect Lady Cecilia, but this is his and Sophia's territory. Clayman casts a spell and a crowd of paper men appears beside him. Yuki asks Cecilia what it is. The girl calls this shikigami a divine creature. This martial arts technique controls objects shaped like humans or animals. Yuki says it's the first time he's seen paper dolls used in combat. Cecilia agrees and adds, they're actually quite strong. Sophia says he always wanted to fight without fully getting involved, so he chose this technique. He figures changing their forms is too much trouble, so he lets them fight as they are. Yuki says that's typical of him. Sophia says everything is here, so they should move on. The young man studies the map and notes they have already made good progress. A little more and they will reach the mining area. From a distance, Clayman sees a huge, chubby monster eating rocks. Yuki was taken aback because it was very large and had a strange color. Clayman said the monster feeds on magical minerals. Ordinary stone-eating monsters eat normal rocks, but mutants like him do not have enough of them. Yuki says if he keeps going like this, they will get nothing. They need to deal with him right away. Clayman told him to stop and said he wasn't done yet. Eating magical minerals changes this monster's body. These minerals contain magic, so magic alone would not harm it. Pointing at Cecilia and Yuki, he says they will not be able to resist this monster. Fia slaps his hands and tells him not to point fingers at others, while Yuki thinks they won't be able to hurt the monster. A young man who uses advanced magic is sure he can defeat this monster easily, but there is very little room here. Clayman warns Cecilia and Yuki not to forget one more thing. Mutants like this are very rare, so they must keep it intact. Sophia asked Clayman why he took on such a stupid assignment. He shouted at her not to hurt him and said he had already thought it all out and that it was really very simple. Pointing at the young man, he says he will cover his body with shikigami, so you will have to defeat the monster from the inside, and then asks what he thinks because it sounds brilliant. Yuki screamed, demanding to know why he had to do it and why the man could not do it himself. And Clayman replied that the man needed to manage the shikigami and could not do both at once. He assures him the dolls will protect him, so he shouldn't worry. Yuki shouted that he wouldn't do that for anything in his life. Sophia cut them off and said she would do it. Clayman was surprised and said the girl could not because he would not allow Sophia to. The girl replied that she was the only one here who had fought in close combat. Reassuring her husband, she says everything is fine. If he uses his technique, everything will be fine. The girl asks whether she is speaking correctly. Clayman agrees. Sophia smiles and says she's counting on his love. He says he simply cannot let her down. Seeing Clayman like that, Yuki tries to figure out what's wrong because this is the first time he has seen him like this, and the man turns to Yuki and Cecilia, asks them to watch the monster closely, and then gives the command to start the task. After Clayman's commanded, Yuki cast the grounding lock spell, and Cecilia cast the holy chain spell. Stone spikes pinned the monster from below and a chain bound him. Suddenly he growled and began to pull himself free. Yuki pushed their magic harder and said they had underestimated the enemy, so they boosted their control magic, using a holy chain, a grounding lock, water pressure, and a snowstorm. The monster roared again. Cecilia was scared and said the roar was so loud, but Sophia interrupted and said it was her turn. Tell Shouta the monster opened its mouth and shouted Sophia's name. Then he used his shikigami magic to wrap his paper dolls around the girl. She nimbly jumped straight into the monster's mouth. At first he didn't realize what had happened. Then his whole body began to contort as Sophia struck him from inside the monster with melee blows. Clayman called up more paper dolls and ordered the monster to stop fighting. Next, he brought forth the real shikigami and sent them into battle. Yuki was surprised that Clayman had summoned the real shikigami. Clayman said it was the first time he had seen Shiki so serious. Cecilia said it was likely because Sophia was already inside the monster. Claim then turned to Yuki and Cecilia and ordered them to keep their guard up until the monster stopped moving. Cecilia and Yuki accepted the order. At last, the monster collapsed unconscious with Sophia on top of it. Yuki offered his hand to Cecilia and told her she had done a great job. Cecilia took his hand and said they had done it. He said he had only done his best. Sophia landed on the ground, and Claim immediately ran to her and took the girl in his arms. He asked if she was okay and said he was very happy. Sophia blushed and said she was fine. She pushed while climbing and told him to stop and let her go. They were not finished because they still needed to find more medicinal herbs, and Yuki and Cecilia watched them and giggled. Yuki walked up to this monster and began putting magic minerals into his backpack, thinking they still needed to collect herbs and that the monster had scattered his stones everywhere, so it would be hard. Finally, they found what they were looking for. Yuki looked up at the sky, the full moon visible, and said it was already quite dark. Clayman said it was all over now, so they wouldn't be able to get home right now, and told Yuki to just relax because they'd leave tomorrow morning. But Yuki frowned and said he couldn't just relax. She leans towards Cecilia and quietly asks if he can fly, and Cecilia says it would look strange and might raise unnecessary questions. He asks the young man what they'll do if someone sees him. Yuki thinks it's a big risk, but they can't delay. If he goes up to them and asks whether something happened, Yuki says it's okay, and that he's just too tired. Sophia said she hadn't completed a guild mission in a long time and wasn't in a good mood, so they need to go back to the boarding house and rest now. Yuki agrees. Late at night, Yuki lay in bed and started thinking about Till and Guy, who might not live to see the morning. The young man wakes up, realizes he cannot sleep, gets out of bed and finds Clayman asleep beside him, and Yuki notices it has been a long time since his last flight. Yuki enters the dining room and finds Cecilia sitting at the table drinking tea. He asks what she is doing there. She replies that she is waiting for him. Approaching him, she gives a bag of medicinal herbs and asks the young man to take them to Sheik. Yuki agrees and says Cecilia's request will be fulfilled. Cecilia says Sophia is sleeping so deeply, maybe today was just too tiring for her. She told the boarding house owner she would watch the place while he had dinner, so if Yuki wanted to fly now would be the time. Yuki understands that Cecilia planned everything so carefully. He thanks her and asks why she is doing this. Smiling, the girl said she was wondering whether he would do it. She said the owner of this house often goes away, so he is not here now, but she thinks he will be back soon. Yuki thinks Cecilia is very caring. He thanks her for everything and says he is on his way. The group smiles and tells the young man to take care of himself. Then Yuki goes outside. Activating his wings and horns, he explains that to use his full power, he must assume this form. He wouldn't do this if he had a choice, but it's an emergency. Yuki goes home. Slipping quietly into his room, he reminds himself that even though he lives here, he must still be careful. Yuki enters the house and tells the gargoyle to wake up. Seeing Guy's cracked head, he shouts that it's too late, then shakes him and urges him to wake up. Yuki tells Guy he is not a good person, and says he cannot just give up and leave the girl alone. And Guy suddenly wakes up and shouts at the young man to stop screaming. The main character exhales and says he's relieved he made it. Guy says the path shows him what he needs, because the young man interrupted his last dream. Yuki agrees and orders Guy to eat something first. Guy stuffs magic minerals into his mouth. The young man shouts that he will explain everything later, but first Guy has to do what Yuki tells him. Guy starts crunching the magic minerals and says he has no idea what the young man is trying to achieve with them. Suddenly, the cracks on Guy's body begin to fade. The gargoyle inspects himself and can't understand how it happened. Yuki exhales and says he is fine now. Guy shouted that the young man should not put anything in his mouth under any circumstances. Yuki apologized and said he was just in a hurry. Guy says it was delicious, so there was no need to rush it. Yuki asks that if Guy is really talking about minerals, he should give me the bag and say there is still half left. Guy beams and says he will eat every last crumb. Yuki realized Guy liked these minerals so much that Yuki couldn't understand Guy's tricks. Guy was beaming like a child and enjoying the goodies. Guy pulls out a mineral and asks what it is. Yuki sees it as the Stone Eater's horn and wonders how it ended up here. Guy decides to eat the horn. The stone tastes completely different, he says. Then he starts screaming that his whole body is getting hot and Yuki is scared. Guy's face lit up and he shouted that he felt extremely hot. Terrified, Yuki asks if he's okay. Guy suddenly becomes his true self, his arm back in place and wings appearing. They looked at each other, confused about what had happened. Yuki realized Guy had wings and horns. It had to be the power left in the mutant Stone Eater's remains. Yuki says he doesn't have much time and needs to leave, then says goodbye to the gargoyle. Arriving at Cecilia's mansion, he enters the room where Till lies, with Sheik beside her bed. Yuki believes Sheik has been with Till the whole time. He cares deeply about this girl. Yuki shakes Sheikah awake and tells him to get up. Yuki says he brought medicinal herbs. Sheikah asks who Yuki is. Opening his eyes, he asks the captain why he looks like a demon. Yuki says it's temporary. Yuki hands Sheikah a bag and asks him to take the herbs he was asked to bring. Needing to leave, he asks Sheikah to take care of Till. Sheikah greets. Yuki sits in a tree and decides it's time for him to go back now. Flying to Clayman, Cecilia, and Sophia, he first tears off his horns and wings. Yuki lies down in bed and feels so tired he wants to sleep. The next morning, Sophia wakes Yuki and tells the young man to get up. He sits up with his eyes barely open and tries to recognize her. The girl says that since she and Clayman didn't wake up, she had to wake the others. It's time to return to Minerva, she says. Yuki opens her eyes and thinks it's really time for them to go back. But there's no need to rush right now. After a while, everyone had boarded the carriage, but Yuki kept swaying from side to side. and Cecilia noticed and asked if the young man was all right. Clayman sarcastically asked what the man was doing at night that kept him from getting enough sleep. Sophia said he was actually sleeping soundly, and Yuki thought he was too exhausted to reply, apologizing that he was very sleepy. He rested his head in Cecilia's lap as she looked down at him with a very sweet smile. After a while, Cecilia asks the young man resting on her lap if he was awake. She also tells him that they are almost there. The young man got up from the girl's lap, giggling, and said that Cecilia and Yuki were so close that sleeping on a girl's lap was so cute. Realizing what the man meant, Yuki asked for forgiveness. Cecilia smiled and said it was fine, and she did not mind. Thanking Yuki, she asked whether yesterday had really been such an eventful day for him. Seeing Cecilia smile, Yuki decided that no matter how hard it had been, getting the award made all his effort worthwhile. He said he would go straight to bed when he got home. Clayman said he had enough sleep and needed to go out to eat, but Yuki decided against it. A few days later, Till was crying at Yuki's house, relieved that Mr. Gargoyle was okay and sorry she hadn't had a chance to visit him. Guy apologized for making her worry, saying he hadn't told her because he didn't want her to worry about him, and then apologized again. Yuki tried to fall asleep and listened until she asked the guy why he was apologizing since she hadn't accused him of anything. Then she suggested changing the subject. Guy turns to Yuki and says, everything is thanks to him and he is very grateful. Till agrees, saying she is grateful to Yuki as well. They continued to thank him. The main character lay back, feeling his eyes close. Till thanks Cecilia and Yuki once again, and Yuki thought Till and Guy were much better now. The girl hugged the gargoyle and felt very happy. The protagonist decided to leave the house and told them he would not interfere. A few days later, Yuki realized that Till had come to Guy. Till goes to the gargoyle almost every day, and they plan various pranks together. For now, Yuki must keep an eye on them. The young man knows he cannot live like this forever. They both nearly died recently, so their behavior makes sense. He just needs to be patient for a while. He cannot stay out of the house all the time. Walking the city's streets, he feels he has covered the whole area without finding anything interesting. Spotting the crowd, he wonders why so many people are there and asks a passerby what is happening. A beastman turns to him and asks whether they've met before. Yuki greets him. The man says that since the demon lord was defeated, trade in the exchange market has expanded so much that even rare artifacts can now be purchased there, and Yuki thinks this is very cool. Bidding the beastman farewell, he notes it's rare to see such a lively atmosphere and walks around to see what's here, feeling his mood has lifted. Then the young man sees the man limp while walking and approaches to say hello. Yuki asks why the man is here and whether he actually came to shop, then asks if there is any news from the guild, and the man replies that he took the day off, and it has nothing to do with that stone eater. Clayman says he needs to buy a wedding anniversary present and has no idea what to get Sophia. Yuki says he's a bit late. Yuki said Clayman might find something here. The man asks whether the young man really believes that, then says he came here for that reason. Yuki offers to help the man, and Clayman tells him to do as he likes. Yuki then asks him to look in his direction. Smiling at him, the main character displays a cute cat ear headband. Yuki says the hairpin will match the maid's uniform perfectly, and that's exactly Clayman's taste. Someone offers the man a piece of jewelry, but he is indignant, says it does not suit his taste at all, and refuses it. It's an anniversary gift, he says, so the young man should stop goofing off. Yuki apologizes and explains he just forgot. Saying he's not himself today, the man asks whether everything is okay, and figures he's probably a little excited because after everything he's been through, he's finally feeling better and more upbeat. After paying the seller, he quietly slips the jewelry into the man's backpack to make fun of him. Then Yuki shouts that he spotted something very cool, and Clayman turns to look at him. He points to the black color and tells the man it is a long coat, usually worn by children with 8th grade syndrome. The girl praised the boy's taste, saying that from its material to its design, the coat could rightly be called the best, and Yuki said he was taking it. Next, he picks up everything because it all looks interesting. The man said he thought the young man had gone a bit overboard when he looked at the huge bag on his back. Yuki says he doesn't have much time to shop for himself, so he takes this opportunity to buy everything he needs. And Clayman notes that so far the young man has picked something very strange. Yuki said he buys whatever his heart tells him, calling it an 8th grader syndrome. And Clayman says the young man's heart is strange too, but then says he has found everything he needs and doesn't care. The protagonist examines Clayman's gift, a set of overseas spices and a new apron, and thinks Clayman has a real knack for giving gifts. He then decides he's finished shopping and asks where they're going next. The man suggests taking on a new task at the guild because he helped the young man pick a gift. Yuki replies excitedly that it's a great idea. The claimant asks whether he really believes that. Yuki tells the man to wait. The man runs around the corner to change and immediately returns, and after a short while the young man appears in a very strange outfit wearing a black helmet, a black cape, and a huge sword on his back. Laughing, he asks Clayman how he likes his new look. The man asked if the young man was likely joking with him. Yuki spins to reveal a sword like lightning and says arguing is pointless because his blood hasn't boiled like this in a long time, then shouts that no one can stop him now. Scratching his ear, Clayman thinks this guy is beyond help, and saying anything to him would only make things worse.